Hey folks, welcome to PRIMO NUTMEG. This is your host Steve, and joining me this evening are Johnny and Ethan, the hosts of another podcast called Cup of Thought. How's it going, guys?
Good.
I'm doing great. So great.
Thank you both for joining me this evening. I wanted to have you on because you are the fourth and fifth persons from Colchester, Connecticut who I know that have a podcast. So I just kind of wanted to, I'm actually new at this. I just started this about 2 or 3 weeks ago and kind of getting the hang of it. So when did you guys start your podcast?
I think, I don't even know.
January, right?
I think the first episode we recorded was February.
Yeah, I
but
knew it
we
was the
talked
beginning.
about it in January.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how many months is that? That's 7-ish,
Yep.
6 or
Yep.
7, with some reasonable amount of consistency.
Yeah.
We miss a lot, but
So what inspired you to start your own podcast?
that was my idea.
That
That was my idea.
John's
100%
always
your idea.
John's always been he's always been big on trying to record stuff. I remember he had a like a tripod, like a portable tripod, and he tried doing like a little car show.
Yes.
'Cause he always was fond of the banter that we have.
Banter. Yeah. But then it was my idea to do audio. So I literally just went up to him and said, Ethan, we're going to do a podcast. And I didn't ask him. No questions. It was a definite. And then it was your idea actually to do audio though, or not audio, to do video, because I didn't really want to bother with it. But then
Actually, you guys are the only ones out of the people who I know that have podcasts who do the video. And I have to say, too, it's really high quality because first off, you have the really cool opening with like the special effects
Oh,
or
yeah.
whatever. And then just like the way you shoot it, it's all very bright and it's kind of like the cool room that you have with like the
Yeah.
comic book stuff in the background. It's very high quality.
yeah, it's strange. The room was very intentional. That took a lot of time, but the lighting is totally coincidental. It just happens to be the lighting from the room.
Really?
There's no rigs or anything. I mean, if it needed it, we would have added it. So it's not like, we just ignored it, but it wasn't intentional at all.
Who does the graphic designing for the intro?
Well, I sort of did. It's a mix of me doing some editing in an Adobe and then also some stuff I bought online. So it's kind of both. And then I made the music in from live.
Right.
So it's kind of it's me, but not like I didn't make the whole thing from scratch because that would have been more than I can do.
We got inspired by Rhett and Link.
There you go.
Rhett and Link?
Yeah.
I actually don't know who or what that is.
Really?
It's like sort of like us, but only funny stuff.
Okay.
So it's basically two guys with a
Yeah.
microphone who talk, but it's funny instead of political and enraging and whatever else you want to say.
Yeah.
So when you came up with the idea for your podcast, did you want it to be political or did you see like mine, I think is like kind of half political, half cultural, which I think you guys kind of are the same thing. Did you have anything specific in mind when you started?
Well, I know we talked about the kind of topics that we were gonna discuss, and me and John.
Well, let me ask you this. Why did you pick virtual porn as your first podcast?
It's clickbait.
Yeah, essentially
actually-
just clickbait. Yeah,
That's a
was
good idea,
100%. I think that was my idea too, actually.
He's like, we need to start with a bang, so let's just
Start with a
virtual
bang.
porn.
I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It kind of worked, sort of. I mean, I don't want to say it worked, but
No, it's a good idea. It's interesting, first one. But yeah, like kind of, I guess the part of the gimmick for your show is because it's Cup of Thought, it's coffee too. Like,
Right.
where did that come into the equation?
We kept trying to figure out a name, and we were deliberating. And
That is hard. It's very hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And he was a douche about it. I kept coming up with so many great names, and to
they
John,
were
he was
not
just
that great.
he just didn't want to do them. So
Yeah.
eventually, I was just like, all right, well, what about Cup of Thought? Like I wanted to start the podcast because he psyched me up for it, and I came
I'm
up
good
with
at that.
that name, and he's like, yeah, we got to do that. But because of the name, we got to drink coffee now. And I was like, why? Why can't it be like iced tea or something that we like? And he's like, no, man, we got to get our viewers. So,
They're like snuff films. The reason people watch is because you don't like coffee.
but then we kind of worked the whole flavor thing around it. And
Yeah.
I mean, some of the ideas we dropped, like we were gonna have like a flavor of the day thing on a board behind us, and
Yeah.
and list like our favorite roast and stuff like that. But
Because it is a different one in every podcast.
Yeah.
there is,
everyone,
yeah.
so far.
So we kind of just transformed that into just us telling the audience what it is.
Yeah, so far it's been a new one every podcast. Part of that is we do a subscription-based thing where we get new ones
Yeah.
every time.
Well, that's
But,
good. That's better than
eventually-
the crap we had.
Yeah, originally we were just doing like whatever was around, so like Folgers and like
So you subscribe to like a coffee of the month type thing?
right, essentially. But they give you 4. It's actually perfect. They give you 4 sample sizes, so it's not a full sample. And
It's called
then
Angel Cup.
perfect. Yeah, Angel Cup. We haven't talked about it on the podcast because I have a feeling they probably wouldn't want to be associated with us.
Probably not.
But we will see.
So what was your favorite coffee that you've had so far?
The ones that taste like creamer.
I liked that one. I don't remember what was in it.
It was one that was good.
It was from, I think it was dark chocolate. Is what it was, I think.
You guys actually did one where I think you had your girlfriends on or something.
Oh,
Yes.
You guys
yeah,
were drinking
Starbucks.
Yes, I didn't like it at all though.
No.
Because it was
Really?
mine was too coffee for me.
Well, I mean, I was just into
It's not
the
a
whipped
word.
Really?
cream.
Starbucks? It's like all sweet stuff.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, man. There's a certain flavor of coffee that I don't like. I don't know what it is. And plus, I think I like coffee better when it's hot. So like as the episode goes on, when it
Yeah.
cools down, it gets worse and worse. Especially if we have to do recuts.
We've-
It's like
yeah.
an hour and a half.
We did
It's nasty.
we did a recut, and for a while I always I like throwing in random crap and like stuff that me and John are consuming. So
That's not okay.
so one time we were having coffee and I threw in like some soda in mine, and I was like,
You put soda in your coffee?
yeah,
Why would you do that?
I don't know. I figured maybe it could be like
It
some
helped
new
though, right?
trend or something.
Yeah, that was
It was good when it was hot, but we had to do a retake, and I almost threw up. It was so bad. I almost.
Did it
There's
have
some
like
of those.
milk in it or cream or whatever?
Yep, cream and
Jeez.
soda.
It's like a kind of like a
I don't go
coffee
for that
float.
stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how that would taste.
I think anything beyond cream and sugar is disingenuous. It's
I
just
think
raw.
if I mean, the problem was I used ginger ale. That was my base. I should have stuck with like orange soda or something.
No, you shouldn't have.
I would try it again.
Maybe
honest.
like cream soda. I think cream soda.
Well, the
would
problem
work.
was that
There are
was
certain
before.
things.
That was before we had Angel Cup. So I mean, I was getting sick and tired of
Right,
like,
Folgers. and
generic
other-
Stop and Shop.
We had literally generic Stop and Shop
Yeah.
coffee. It was pretty bad, but
It was
you know, it's coffee. So for someone who hates coffee, bad coffee's not
creamer
that much worse.
helps.
Yes, I love creamer. I love milk. I could just forget the coffee. You keep the coffee. I'll drink the creamer. That'd be great. Actually, that'd probably be gross. I think.
Yeah,
Right? Straight creamer.
I tried like a small like cup of that, and it was not good.
Yeah. Was it the cup of thought?
Does the coffee
was
help
thinking.
facilitate conversations? Do you think?
He doesn't drink most of it. Like 80% of his coffee he doesn't drink.
I'm getting better, but no.
I drink it intentionally because I feel like I owe it to like the 12 people who watch the episode to drink the coffee.
I
If
take
they're
the
gonna
first
sit-
sip for them.
That's that's good. That's good. No, I think it helps. Sure, like anything.
Yeah.
You know, like drinking anything helps. I mean, it's the same.
Well, on my show, what I like to do is drink a beer. So tonight we're drinking PBR. At least
There
I
you
am.
go.
I don't know if you guys want one.
There's actually I'll take it. There's actually it's really weird. There's a podcast. It's like a Christian podcast called the Reformed Pubcast. And it's these
Really?
two guys who talk about not just that, they talk about other things, Breaking Bad, all this other stuff.
Mm.
And they just drink beer all the time, which I think is kind of amazingly unique.
Yep.
Like regardless of what you think,
Yeah.
it's a good
It sounds
blend.
interesting. Actually, let me ask you this too, taking a step back maybe. So, what is your favorite podcast out there? Is it that one that you guys mentioned before, those two guys?
I think it's a Cup of Thought. Probably my favorite.
Well,
Or
besides yourself.
Hands down.
it's just the quality, you know.
Yeah.
So and they're good looking. That helps too.
So sharp.
Do you?
Dashing.
I don't even think. Do you even listen to podcasts? I listen to a ton. Not a ton. I listen to podcasts a lot. Not
No,
a ton.
but I want to. I don't work in an office and I don't have an iPod anymore, so I kind of can't.
Have you guys heard the Joe Rogan podcast?
Yeah, the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah,
I
that
have
one's
not.
really good.
Yeah, he's really long though, And I mean, podcasts are long anyway, but
Right,
he
yeah.
goes like crazy directions. Like I like to listen to most of the podcasts I listen to are similar to ours. So when we started, we didn't, you asked about topics, what we were going to discuss.
Yeah.
And we pretty much just decided that we didn't want there to be anything that we wouldn't talk about. So anytime we've wanted to talk about something, there wouldn't be anything that we had was like taboo or anything like that. So like we've been white guys talking about feminism, and then like we just did one about
Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, we just did a Black Lives Matter one. We haven't uploaded it yet. That's why we're still alive.
That should be interesting.
That's why we're still alive to do
Oh,
this. Yeah, but like we don't.
Well,
want,
yeah, you had one too, the Draw Muhammad one. I was pretty flabbergasted when I saw that.
Well, actually,
list of videos.
originally we weren't gonna have a picture of Muhammad on the thing.
Yeah.
And that's that picture is the one, that big contest they had where the guys came out and they ended up getting shot. That's the one that won. And we weren't going to do that originally. We were going to have like a blank thing that said like Muhammad or something like that. But then after the podcast, I felt like disingenuous and like cowardly to like not put it in there, because not like in general, like everyone should do Muhammad, do whatever you want. I don't care.
Right.
But like based on what we said, I felt
it is. I mean, it's pretty brave because a lot of popular media who address the topic, they won't do it. Like I saw I think it might have even been linked from your video or like in the suggested videos on YouTube.
I know exactly what you're talking
with Saturday Night Live when they're doing the Draw Muhammad thing, and they just leave it blank.
It was hilarious though.
It was funny, but they didn't do it. And then I think
but they couldn't.
I think South Park also, they have like a Justice League of like religious figures, and they just have like for Muhammad like a censored bar.
Well, they were the ones who like brought it up in the first place.
Right.
And they were asked several times like who is, people were asking them about Christianity and how Christianity like comes against them, and they're like, not really, like Christians are just whatever. They were really worried
that was when they started.
Right, that was
Jesus
years
was
ago.
like one of the main characters. It was Jesus and Satan were like two of the main characters on South Park.
Yeah, and
but they didn't get death threats or anything. Like,
right,
I see what you're saying.
I mean, it's I don't know. I feel like in my heart I want to run more the middle of the road than I do in real life.
Yeah,
and I don't know that I can do anything about that. That's probably because I'm a nutmegger. Is that?
That's so. The name of this show is Primo Nutmeg,
right?
And it's because we as kinetic cutters or Connecticuticians or whatever, we're nutmeggers. That's our nickname.
How long do you have to be in Connecticut to be a nutmegger? Do you have to be born here? Or is it Texas? Like, I wasn't born here, but I got us here as soon as I could, kind of thing, or?
I'm not sure.
And what is a nutmegger?
I think from what I've heard, it has something to do with like people, like con men, like selling fake nutmeg or something.
That makes so much sense.
I believe that's what it's in reference to.
That it makes so much sense.
It's kind of like carpetbagger or something. It's along those lines.
It makes perfect sense because it's not at all what it sounds like, which is exactly why it makes sense. Yeah. You're more of a nutmegger than me. I've been here for a really long time, but.
Aren't you from Connecticut?
No,
You're not from Connecticut.
Well, I was born in Massachusetts, and then I lived in Missouri.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
And culturally, yeah. Well, somebody I know just moved to they didn't just move. They're thinking about moving to Massachusetts. Yeah. And I was like, what's the point? Like, you're basically in Connecticut, except like, worse traffic.
What part of Mass? Like if it's Boston
I don't
or
know.
something.
Well, that's true, but that's, yeah.
If it's like Western Mass, then essentially.
Yeah. Well, I have no idea.
Well, actually, I knew a girl who moved up to Boston, and the people up there thought that Connecticut is like a really dangerous place because when they think of Connecticut, they think of Bridgeport and New Haven and stuff.
That's true. Bridgeport is sketchy.
Well, when I was out in South Bend, Indiana, where I've lived for the past 2 years, I had to explain to people that there are essentially 3 different Connecticut's.
Right.
There's like the millionaire Connecticut and Greenwich and Stamford or whatever, and New Canaan. Then there's, the horribly poor, crime-ridden Connecticut of Bridgeport and New Haven and the north end of Hartford or even the south end of Hartford. And then Eastern Connecticut, which is I love Eastern Connecticut so much. Just rural and beautiful hills and rivers and forests.
Even the city, down in New London's not,
I love New London.
It's not Bridgeport.
Do you ever hang out on Bank Street?
I mean, sometimes I go down there for, obviously I go down there for Sail Fest.
Yeah.
And then we go down,
Ocean
occasionally we
Beach.
go down there. Yeah, well, yeah, the beach is nice.
Yeah.
I guess.
And even like the area there where they have all the ships docked.
Yep.
Like they have old sail ships
Yeah,
and
it's
stuff like
beautiful.
that.
I would
Pretty neat.
actually, I wanted to live down there, but I work in Glastonbury, so it wasn't going to happen. Right now I live in Salem and work in Glastonbury. Nutty. Like half the state to drive. But it is true. It's almost like northern and like southern, like England. Like where it's
Yeah.
like, it's total, like prejudice is totally different.
Yeah, it's definitely weird because then you got like all these farmlands just like smack dab in the middle, and
Right.
you go like 15 minutes like one way, and then you're in, and then you can see Hartford on the horizon. Like it's just crazy to me.
It's like Camelot.
Well, that's an interesting thing about Colchester too, and that I appreciate more after having lived in South Bend, Indiana. Because in South Bend, Indiana, if you don't want to hang out in South Bend, Indiana, you have to drive like 2 hours north to Kalamazoo, or 2 hours south to Indianapolis, or 2
Right.
hours west to Chicago.
Right.
Here, it's like a half an hour in any direction is a different city.
Right. Yeah.
So it's pretty culturally diverse.
It is. And I mean, it's good and bad at the same time. I think one
Why?
thing.
Why is it bad?
Well, one thing I noticed when so I went to school for a year down in Georgia, in Savannah, Georgia, which is, it's about the size, population wise, as Hartford. It's
Okay.
just bigger, like geographically, so it's not quite as compact. And one thing I realized when it comes to terms of like race and things like that is people in the Northeast tend to think of the South as, not necessarily extraordinarily racist, but more racist than they are here. And that
Right.
there's
Yeah,
more
that's a stereotype
Right.
of the South.
there's more racial tension. But I think in reality, when I went down there, is I realized just how segregated like Connecticut is.
Oh, it very, very much is. And even out in the Midwest, it's much more. It's less segregated.
Right. And I
mean,
think
what is Colchester? Colchester is like 95% white, I think.
right, exactly. Well, it's like if you go to like Poland or Sweden, and they're like, we don't have any race violence, and it's like, well, obviously you don't have race violence. They're all white people, and I think it's a very similar thing here, where it's like you don't see as much racial tension because you don't see as much races,
'Cause it's not an opportunity.
But when
for-
a white family drives through, drives down 44 or down Albany Avenue and stuff, they're gonna feel tension that they wouldn't feel normally.
Right.
And I think that people tend to be very blind to that kind of stuff.
That's the sad thing about Connecticut. And again, that's kind of part of what I try to explain to people who weren't from here, is that this is, I think, the richest state in the country, but it has the biggest economic divide
Sure.
between the rich and the poor. And I think that does go into race too.
Yeah, we have like 5 or 6 of the richest cities, of the top 10 richest cities. 5 or
Right.
6 of them are in New Canaan, I think, is the richest one.
Really?
Yep, which is kind of strange because it's not really in,
Yeah.
it's not really down near Greenwich. It's up in Litchfield County.
I also read some statistic, I believe it was in Forbes or something, where they had ranked different areas of the country based on the cost of living versus the minimum wage or average wage, something along those lines, and
Which is really the measurement that matters. I mean,
yeah, how big the disparity is. And one of them on there was Norwich, New London, Connecticut. So essentially this
Right.
county.
right.
So I guess, a lot of people here aren't really getting paid what they need to get paid to live in this area.
Well, part of that is that it's really expensive. So like,
Right.
um,
It's extremely expensive. And that was something that I noticed too when I moved back here, was like just groceries cost like 2.5 times as much as they do out in the Midwest.
sure. And there's lists of towns that have over 100,000, the average. So like Colchester is one of them. It's one of the towns that has the average income for a family is over $100,000.
Mm.
And there's not that many of them, actually. You'd be surprised. I mean, $100,000 for a family doesn't sound like much to us in this area, but it's actually a pretty significant number. I mean, especially when you got house prices in Colchester, you're like 300, 400.
The property values here are insane.
Oh, they're nuts.
Yeah, they are.
You know,
I could never buy a house here.
That's what
ever.
historic value does.
it's like $250,000 for an average house.
I could never buy a house here ever. I mean, I wouldn't even if I could.
Yeah.
Not. I mean, it's a good investment, sort of, but
I mean,
I couldn't do it.
I know people who have talked. I mean, there is a trend of people leaving Connecticut and
Yeah.
moving down south, and there's a very good reason for that. There's taxes and
Yep.
just inflated property value and all that.
especially industry. The only people who I think really have good business staying here are service industries because there's so much money here,
Right.
that it's worth it to stay.
And the seasons help too.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Because that just drives it. Because even if it's not just like basic services, it's stuff that's affected by the seasons.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's another reason I would want to leave. To be honest,
I love the seasons.
I said I'm looking for a place where it's winter for 1 month. 1 month.
What?
Is awesome. Like this whole 4 months of winter. That the freaking thing said it's supposed to be like a crazy winter this year again. I think they're kind of full of crap. They don't know what we're talking about. But I'm worried about it.
I like the snow.
Ethan, are you from Connecticut?
Yeah,
So,
I've been in this town my whole life.
Okay, so you're a Seatown original.
He's adventurous, a townie, almost you could say.
Yeah. I am too. I'm surprised that you're not because I remember your family from when I was a little kid.
Well, I've been here forever. I just wasn't born here.
Yeah.
Yeah. My family remembers more than me, like my older sisters and stuff. But I was the youngest, so I wasn't born here. But essentially, I came to Colchester in 4th grade, something like that. So I've been here. I'm essentially a nutmegger, even though I wasn't born here, because I don't remember really anything else. So it is what it is.
So getting back to your podcast, let me ask you guys, what was your favorite episode of your podcast that you've done so far?
That's hard. Yeah. Like the most fun or like the one I thought was the best?
Well, both. What? Let's start with the fun one first. Which one did you have the most fun doing?
That's difficult. I don't know. I liked some of the geek stuff because it's less pressure.
Yeah. Like the virtual porn, I mean, that was pretty fun. Just
virtual porn
we
usually
got to speculate.
Yeah, we got to speculate. I like anything where the jokes are easy and they say themselves.
Yeah.
That's nice. But I don't know. I go on waves. It's we'll go 2 or 3 serious ones, and then there'll be one that's just let's talk about video games and stuff. Because I don't like doing either one for too long.
Yeah.
Where it's we need to chill this out. This is too serious. And then it's we need to do something meaningful. This is just bull crap. But I don't know. What do you think is the best one? I don't even.
Well, I mean, the Sanders one brought up a lot.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Well, that was a clip, right? So that was actually from. I have a thing here. Episode number 12, The Crisis in Greece.
Right. It wasn't even about Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. Well, what you do is smart, actually, because you do what Joe Rogan does, where you do kind of like a best of the week type thing. So you were talking about Greece, and Bernie Sanders just came up, and then you guys took that clip and made a separate video.
Right.
And that separate video that you made got well over 1,000 hits.
Yeah.
And
it got more than the other one did.
But at the same time, a lot of that was critical too.
Right, almost all of it. Right now, there's 50. Last time I looked, and I try not to look at it too much, but it was 58. Well, I've got it on my phone, so I get the thing. It's just you got another dislike.
Every time you get a comment or whatever.
Slow tier.
And not all. When it's their new comments, I don't get alerts for replies unless they're replying to me.
Right.
But it was 58 or 59 dislikes and 3 likes. I was dang, this is aggressive. If you thought that was the sections of the population, politics would change so much.
Yeah.
It'd be Bernie Sanders is a shoo-in for the nomination.
Well, I think what was so funny about that is we're just coming up with a thumbnail, and
oh yeah, I knew, but I didn't.
He's like, I'm put the hammer and sickle on his forehead and do 3, so it's 666, and and we're just having so much fun, just messing with it. We didn't know that it was gonna have so much hate.
We knew, obviously, when you put the hammer and sickle on someone's forehead,
Well, we thought we'd have more supporters.
Yeah, well, we knew people were gonna be upset, but
well, when you have his name in there, you're gonna have people that are looking for him,
right?
Know,
right.
Yeah.
Very. Bernie Sanders. Most people pretty much line up they either like Bernie Sanders a lot, or they think he's not gonna win. There's very few people who, and they don't think he's going to win because they just don't care about him. They think he's just some crazy old guy. There's very few people who line up aggressively against Bernie Sanders.
I have been noticing it more and more on Facebook, though.
Well, as he's getting popular, yeah.
Right, yeah. Well, that's the thing, too, is, I think it's becoming more and more obvious that Hillary can't be the nominee.
Right.
That
I hope not.
Yeah, there are the Bernie Sanders people on the left who don't want her there for political reasons.
That's not why she's not going to be the nominee.
Yeah, but then there's also the whole email scandal thing.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think there was a poll recently that came out, and they gave people a list of. I question the credibility of it, but they gave people a list of descriptions of adjectives to describe Hillary Clinton, and like the number
Right.
one was like liar, or like the number two was like untrustworthy, and then like around 4 it gets to like strong and like well spoken, like good things. But
Yeah.
I think really even people who like Hillary Clinton don't really trust Hillary Clinton.
Well, that's the thing too, is I really think it's just a partisan type thing where
Sure.
people, they're kind of told that it's her time, it's her
Yeah.
turn as the
I hate
Democratic
when people say that about
nominee.
anybody.
Yeah,
It's
it's really
ridiculous.
stupid. But yeah, I mean, I've been actively looking for a real Hillary Clinton supporter, and I can't find anyone. I don't
No.
personally know anyone who really wants Hillary Clinton.
I mean,
as the nominee.
well, Jess was pretty.
Yeah,
Hillary
Jess was kind of dodgy.
She's someone we work with. She's not really very politically active. All she knows is that her grandparents are like old grudgy conservatives who like yell about Hillary and love Trump.
Yeah.
And so she's like, "Oh, I'm voting for Hillary," which is funny because her 7-year-old son hates Hillary Clinton because he hangs out with his grandparents all the time. My thing
Good
about
on them.
yeah, really, I mean, that kid is straight up indoctrinated. That is true. I mean, but agree or not, he's indoctrinated.
I think going back to the favorite episode, mine would probably have to be the Bruce Jenner one.
Oh, that's fun.
Just because
Caitlin, Ethan.
I don't know, just because we got to fight the status quo nowadays.
I really questioned the status quo.
Hmm.
I think middle America, like not in like the Fox News middle America. I mean, like physically middle America.
Right.
Like I think if you take from California to like Connecticut and take all that, I think the majority of people are kind of just on the Bruce, Kate. I don't even give a crap. Just move on. Let's move on with my life. I think most people don't ardently support that. They're just kind of.
I think they're kind of just like barely on the notion of tolerance for that, I think.
Well, I don't understand why we just like forgot that like it killed somebody.
Yeah.
Like I know it's probably manslaughter and like it wasn't, it's not intentional.
Wait,
and everything.
what are you talking about?
Bruce,
He killed someone?
Well, he hit somebody with a
Like a
car,
car,
like,
yeah.
like 2 months before
and
SB.
since then,
I
like
know
there's like
was before
he's
the,
been having like coming out parties and stuff, and like everybody's like celebrating
Right.
this the surgery and all that and the transformation. But it's
got a
crazy
TV
because
show.
it's like it's crazy because it's like there's all these pending manslaughter charges and all that.
I never heard of that. You know who else killed someone with their car? Matthew Broderick. Like back in the 80s. He
oh
hit
yeah,
someone
I
with
heard
his car.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've not. It happens a lot, I guess. I
Celebrities just hit common people with their cars.
just pay the fine and move along.
yeah,
But it's not. I mean, and it's manslaughter. It's whatever. But that's not really the point. The point is that it's like they just like didn't talk about it. Again, that kind of freaks me out. That it's
Yeah.
like they killed somebody. Like and like even if you're not guilty, right? And people say like, oh, you shouldn't feel guilty. It wasn't on purpose. You should feel guilty, right? Like,
Yeah,
like
of
if you're a
course.
human being, you should feel guilty. And it kind
Right.
of it disturbs me a little bit that there's all these like speeches going on and this happy like emotional stuff, and it's like you like killed a guy like a month ago. Like that should bother you, I think. But I mean, I don't know. I guess. But that's my, it just doesn't seem to be there to me. But what do I know? I know what the media shows me. So I don't.
Yeah, that's the thing is sometimes I wonder about just kind of the dialogue of what's happening in our society. It just kind of all seems manufactured. And,
Well, I think that's getting better in some ways.
well, with the internet, sure. I
Yeah.
mean, jabronis like us can have our podcasts.
Right. And I think it's, I don't know, it's getting better, but it's not at the same time because you can see the creeping hands of government and even corporations like getting around the internet and
Yeah.
getting in there. Like with like BuzzFeed had like a big
Well-
debacle with like Planned Parenthood and stuff
Yeah.
where like they did
Yeah.
things weird, and it's like, hey, why don't we just not have anything to do with any of these people? Just talk about what we think and
Well, there are
Think below
still
those lines.
essentially 5 companies that own
Right.
every television station
right.
for the most part.
Well, TV's garbage. I haven't had a TV subscription.
Yeah,
ever.
but they still kind of dictate what the dialogue is.
Sure.
Like you get different perspectives online, but it's still kind of governed by what MSNBC or Fox News or CNN says.
Yeah, they kind of just twist like every kind of story to whatever they want it to be. Like they
Right.
don't, I've definitely kind of like caught them on their BS for a lot of issues. Like they just won't spin the story both ways. They just kind of like,
Right.
this is what it is.
And that's both sides. I mean, so one of the things
Right.
I do, I don't watch the news at all. Like the
Nah,
only
I
time I'd
don't
ever
either.
watch the news is if it's on a clip on YouTube. But I pretty much am my news is totally dependent on the internet.
Yeah, well,
Right.
we
And
read
it's,
it.
Yeah, it's dependent on, but
It's still spun that way, though.
sure, but you get around it sort of because you read Fox and
Right.
Breitbart and Blaze, but then you read HuffPo and Vox and the
That's
Guardian
the thing
and
is
stuff.
is going to different sources and being a critical thinker.
Right. And you hope you can get the truth, sort of, at
Yeah.
least. I mean, sort of. That's the hope anyway. I don't know how realistic that is. Well, like, and things like Cecil the lion.
Cecil, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like, who gives a crap about a friggin' lion? like this.
Yeah, man, I have to credit you too because you're one of the first people who I saw like saying how ridiculous that was on Facebook. And then there's this other people posting it like, oh, don't you feel so horrible about this lion? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, it sucks that a lion got killed, but there are thousands and thousands of people
Yeah.
dying all day long for shit that we could stop.
Right.
easily.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just, I
And
mean,
if you ask Zimbabweans, they don't give a crap about it.
yeah, most of
Yeah.
them don't care.
They're like, who's
It's like,
Cecil?
could you help us stop all the disease
Yeah, like
and
we
war
have
and
poverty and a
poverty?
dictator and like
it really is. It's pretty. It's
Yeah.
pretty nutty. It's just so. It's
And again, that was like because of Jimmy Kimmel, right?
Right.
Didn't he kind of start that?
well, he
really?
he made it. He spurred it. I'll say that for
Yeah.
sure. Where he like cried about it a little bit, and it's like, are you serious, man? Like you're gonna cry
Yeah.
about? It's just like. It just drives me. That's why I couldn't live in California. Like I said
Yeah.
before the podcast,
Well-
I couldn't handle those kind of people. I'd be like, "Are you freaking? Is this a joke? Like,
I think
are you serious?"
what's worse about it is now there's like just a growing trend of like just like coming up with pariahs for all our anger
yeah,
and
constantly.
yeah and
Scapegoat after scapegoat.
exactly and
Be
now we have
furious at this person. They said something bad.
and we have like doxing now, so people are just like, oh well, here's all their private information, like let's just post it online. And then so like the dentist that
Oh,
was
yeah.
involved in the hunt, like
Right.
Had to hide for his life.
yeah, I mean, people just
Psycho.
like people are like not even blasting just him, but his family too, and it's like people are psychotic. They view an issue and it just like consumes them, and it's like they've just given up their morals on this. And I think what's funny to me about it is I mean, I could be completely wrong about this, but the people
Maybe.
the people that I know that mostly blew up about this were left-leaning people.
Well, that's
Which is
because
crazy, 'cause
that's
that's
because the
supposed to
right
be
just kills animals. And doesn't
Yeah,
care.
yeah, they're like, I don't care. We hunt all the time, but I think that's
He's
just
like
crazy.
petting.
'Cause-
He's petting. He's like Tiger Rug.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't see the big deal about.
well,
it.
on like one hand, they're like upholding Caitlyn Jenner as like that award she got, and they're all like, oh, like clapping for her, and then on the other hand, they're like, look at this damn dentist, and like let's go after him, and this is a good thing, and like nobody ever like spoke out in mainstream about it.
Well, I definitely think it's the pariah thing where it's not just that. I mean, it's a really strange scenario that's happened where it's like it was not originally, but it was conservative Republicans who were like, you can't say that, you can't do this, we
Yeah.
got to censor people. And now it's like totally flipped where it's like, let's say liberals, whatever word you want to use. It's not, solely. I mean, you have libertarian liberals who are fine with it, but a lot of authoritarian liberals who are just trying to censor people now the opposite way. And now it's funny because it's like the libertarian conservatives are now like, whoa, don't censor anybody. Let everybody say whatever the hell they want. And then you have people like Bill Maher who like is now found himself in a really weird place
Yeah.
where like there's times where he's like yelling at his own crowd to be like, listen, people, we have to be able to say whatever they want.
No, very
Right.
often. Because his whole thing was that he was saying that Islam is
Yeah.
more violent than Christianity or something along those lines. And he really pissed off a lot of the left.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those outspoken atheists said stuff like that,
Yeah, I think Sam Harris, too.
Yeah,
was a
he's-
thing where they were
he's got a
both
whole
together.
Book, he's got a whole book about it and everything.
Right.
And even, well, I mean, and Dawkins is always kind of a little bit of he always kind of pussyfoots around that kind of stuff. But
Right.
he said some stuff. But I mean, yeah, Sam Harris was really outspoken about that.
There's actually, after that, he kind of explored the topic more and more, which is interesting. He had a woman on the show who wrote an article for it. I think it was Huffington Post. I could be wrong, but dealing with comedy and about how comedy tours on college campuses are very censored now because they don't want to offend homosexuals or different ethnic groups, things like that. And also, I think Jerry Seinfeld came out with something where he said he wasn't playing colleges anymore
that was
because
on,
he's being censored.
Was that Seth Meyers? Late
I
was it Late Night with Seth Meyers? I saw it when it came out. I think it was Late Night with Seth Meyers, but it was on a talk show for sure where he said he doesn't even play those shows anymore because they don't do it. And there's a couple other comedians who said that. I don't want to say, I don't remember who it was, but there's a couple.
I think Chris Rock was one of them too.
I didn't want to say Chris Rock because I wasn't sure if it was Chris Rock.
I think he was also involved in that because he's friends with Jerry Seinfeld actually. Yeah. And I think he was saying something along the lines of, people don't have a sense of humor anymore.
Right. Well, and it's not even so much like, I have no problem with people being offended. That makes sense. So like people
are offended by everything.
Right.
Yeah. It's like you can't say anything anymore without people getting seriously offended by it.
Right. The enforcement is what bothers me.
Yeah. I mean, you have colleges, like the University of New Hampshire, actually, they recently came out with a list of words not to say. And their whole spin was like, well, we're not censoring you. I think that was in that
same article.
Yeah, but they're like, we're not censoring you, but please don't
we're
say
just
these
having
words.
you sign this thing that says you're not
these
gonna
words
say
hurt
words.
our feelings.
Well, they're crazy ones in there too. Like ghetto was in there, and like it was nuts.
Like American
crazy was in there.
Illegal alien. But
no one can be illegal. That was I've heard someone say that, and I'm like, well, like. It's just semantic garbage, really.
It is. Well, I think what bothers me is
doesn't mean anything.
There's classes now with like trigger warnings. So like right in the curriculum or whatever, or like before a class, if there's any material that the professor or I guess the student governing body is like, oh, well, that could hurt people's feelings or offend them. Then they have to have like a trigger warning,
right?
So people aren't gonna like blow up about it because I guess they're trying to cover their own backs.
Well, like,
but it's
how do these
silly.
people live in real life? That's what I want to know. Like, how do you?
Well, that's the thing about colleges too. Academia is segregated from the rest of society, where you get outraged about these things and you don't really understand how what's going on in the real world at the same time.
Right. And then I think that's. One of the big issues is that, I mean, college is so screwed up. It's
for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, there's so many
reasons.
Yeah, there's like regulation where there shouldn't be regulation, and there's not regulation where there should be regulation. It's a very screwy system. But I think one of the biggest things that's screwed up about it is what you said, that it's so separate from reality.
It's an echo chamber.
Where exactly where all the people you have there. So like if you're like I didn't finish it, but I was 3 years into an English degree. And one of the reasons I didn't finish it was because I was like, this is all bull crap. But
it's not very helpful either.
No, it's not. I mean, if you're the lucky one, it can be, but it's not,
No, I needed to go back for a graduate degree because I had an English BA and it was not helpful. And I have two other friends who have English BAs, and one works at Stop and Shop and one was working at Wendy's.
Well, I'm glad I did better than them and I left. So that was a good decision. Thank you for encouraging me. But I think one of the things about it is that you have people who have their doctorates in, medieval whatever.
Right.
And all they've ever done is academia. And so they know nothing about the real world. And it's like, how are these people preparing people for real world, for industry and for business and for education and things like that, when all they've ever done is teach college? And it's like, that's crazy to me. I mean, not all of them, but the majority of them. And people who have been in the workforce, were in the workforce for like 4 years. I mean, that's not real experience. And one of the things that I really appreciate about certain, like vocational schools and things like that, is that these are people who really have existed in the real world and who at least have a basic understanding of, hey, this is reality. You're going to get your feelings hurt. Get over it.
You know what I think? I think it's really funny. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in this because, again, I could be wrong, but I think my experience is that it's majority conservative, I guess right leaning idea to homeschool.
Sure.
And that gets a ton of criticism for like, oh, you're sheltering them, or you're just pushing your own ideals to them. But then at the same time, what we're talking about these colleges, it's like the same thing with that kind of echo chamber, and they're like, oh, well, this is a triggering word, and like, what the hell is that gonna do in the real world when nobody gives a crap and nobody's gonna like try and catch themselves saying certain words.
Well, that's
And
the
you-
thing is they want to change society so that everyone is like that, like it is in academia.
Right. Well, and I think people would say things like it's total accusation that comes against the left. I don't. There's no other. I hate that you're forced to use words that
Yeah.
like are used by them. So it's like to describe them, but whatever. It's a criticism that you're looking for a utopian world that's impossible. It's never going to happen. You're an idealist.
Right.
But I don't even think that that's a good idea. I don't think a world where no one gets offended or no one gets their feeling hurt is a good idea. I think it's a good
No,
idea.
it's not. It's a horrible idea.
Right. And one of the reasons that I don't
And
like
that's a thing too about like, if you go back to the left in like the 60s or the 70s, they were all about offending people. Like,
Right.
people should be offended. That's how you
Yeah.
have, a
George
culture
Carlin.
that's exactly.
Right. Well,
Or Lenny Bruce, it's how you have a vibrant culture is
Right.
people get offended by
Yeah.
things and you have a dialogue about shit that bothers you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
About
and
stuff that matters.
And I think really, well, that's one of the reasons where I use terms and identify with terms like conservative or liberal or authoritarian or libertarian, but only so much in the present. Because anytime you take that historically, it's just going to get nutty and get crazy.
Right.
So it's like, what's a conservative, 60 years ago, they were making big government so that black people couldn't get integrated. I mean, and that's the total opposite of what most conservatives would say they are now. They want little
Right.
government. That's nothing. So it's useless in that sense in the past. But I think it's an unnecessary evil, I guess, for now, because you need to talk about it somehow.
Exactly.
I agree. So we're going to take a break now. We're going to listen to some music by a Seatown legend, Mike Messervy. And then we're going to be back to talk about some of your specific podcast episodes.
All right.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
And we're back.
Oh,
So, John, you were just telling me that you actually listened to my first podcast when we
Yes.
covered the first GOP debate. That was
Mhm.
me, Patrick, and Jack. Did you have any? I'm just curious because we're talking about your podcast. Did you
Sure.
have any first impressions of that podcast?
oh, the podcast or of the topic? I
Well,
mean,
either.
okay, podcast wise, it was good. It's very conversational, which is always good. The one thing that tends to happen with our podcast is because we have it pretty structured. Because part of it is because we put them on YouTube, so we don't want it to be 2 hours long. Because
Right. No, I've been doing mine like an hour and a half each.
Right, and so we keep it kind of short, so we keep it more structured, so it's less conversational. Part of that is because it's the camera too, so we're not looking at each other, we're looking, at the camera. And I don't know why I just did a motion; they can't see me, but and I think is very conversational. It's good for that, and obviously, doing a conversation with people is easier. So I think that's a good thing to have, especially at the beginning. As far as the GOP. I'm both very disappointed and very surprised by the GOP. I tend to vote Republican just more because of issues than because of political alliance. But
Why are you disappointed?
well, part of it was obviously Fox News baiting people, but kind of the soap opera-ish of it. Even like it's reality television, which is kind of the race always is, but even more so than normal. I feel like it was, like with Chris Christie and Rand Paul, where like Rand Paul just looks like an animal the whole time. Like I think he did horrible.
Yeah,
because he just
I
looks
have
like
to agree.
he just looks like a crazy person.
I thought he did a very bad job. He seemed like he was whining, kind of.
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
A poor performance, and like trying to go after Trump, and just it wasn't working at all.
No, I don't think. I think the only way to beat Trump is to wait and to be reasonable.
Well, yeah,
think.
and actually ask him about policy.
Right.
I went on his webpage the other day.
Yeah, I saw that.
And looked for his policies, and he has one policy point:
It's
immigration
immigration,
reform.
yeah.
That's the only thing in the policy section of his website currently,
Yeah,
or at least
well,
the other day.
And the thing is, it's so early on that no one even cares yet. I don't think about policy. If they care at all, ever, I don't.
Well, no, I don't think I don't think a lot of Republican voters care because Trump is beating everyone by like 20 or 30 percentage points.
I know
at this point.
it's nutty. I don't think either of us are particularly excited about the prospect of a Trump president. And that's an interesting question. So Trump, Hillary, who wins? I don't know.
Well, here's an interesting matchup. I think that would be entertaining. And I think I actually said it on that podcast. Is Trump and Biden?
Yeah,
because they're both, they both kind of tell it how it is,
right.
But they're both kind of
Weird with women. That's true. Biden had all like the leaning on shoulders and like touching people things, and Trump was accused of being a rapist
by his ex-wife too, right?
Yeah, well, like she redacted it and everything since then.
Yeah.
But I mean, with billionaires, you never freaking know. Who knows?
Yeah, but I think that would be an interesting matchup. So if I could pick out of the pool of Republican and Democratic candidates, I would say I would want to see Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders, which I get the impression that you guys would just not like at all.
I wouldn't. I don't know about you. I wouldn't mind Rand Paul so much.
I wouldn't mind Rand Paul.
I don't particularly
That's
like
something.
Rand Paul, but it's got less to do with his policies than it has to do with Rand
Right.
Paul.
Yeah, I agree. I like his rhetoric. I just don't think he's sincere. I think he's just capitalizing on what his father did and
Yeah.
trying to help that or make that help him catapult into the White House,
Yeah, the last election, I liked Ron Paul a lot, actually. But
Really?
And I do tend to lean more libertarian than maybe. I mean, I want to be a libertarian. I'd say it that way.
Well, that's actually a good segue because I wanted to talk about some of your episodes of your podcast. And you had one, episode 7, the tiniest, most ridiculous nation,
Liberland.
Liberland. So for those of you who don't know, Liberland is a country, nominally, a self-proclaimed country.
Right, that's the right way to say it.
Between Croatia and Serbia. And they are based on libertarian ideology. They just proclaimed independence, I guess, on April 13th of this year. So on that podcast, you actually went through their constitution. You read different parts of their constitution.
Pretty short, surprisingly. It's like 2 pages. You would think a constitution would be longer than that.
What if they're around?
Well, it's a
right
small
now?
country.
How are they doing right now?
The same they were before.
So terrible.
I mean, but how do you? I criticize them, but like you can only really criticize them when you put them on like the scale that they put themselves on, like
Right.
a nation,
Yeah.
even a
Right.
micronation. I mean, if you just think of them as
Yeah.
like a group of guys getting together to do a thing, you're like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, but they're like, oh, we're gonna have diplomats, and we want Croatia rather, to come talk to us about
Recognize-
like the
yeah.
border disputes and all that.
Right. When right now you're basically the size of like your country's the size of like a 7-Eleven crew. Like, it's pretty. I mean,
Yeah, and only one person had a house when we checked, and like everybody else had tents.
right.
Really?
Yeah,
But they'll get somewhere. I'm pretty sure they'll get somewhere.
But like from the objective policy
Right.
point of view, you actually did criticize something. So to
Sure.
go through it, so constitutionally, Liberland cannot have a deficit.
Sure.
They cannot run at a deficit. And you said that was unfeasible, and you wouldn't have put that in a constitution because it was unfeasible that a country could not have a deficit.
Do you want to go or do you want me to go?
I'll go.
Okay.
I think that's an unfeasible notion because they're starting with nothing. I mean, like we just said, there were so many, like what was it, like 100,000 people applying to get in. But they
Some
only
crazy
had,
number. If you go through those, it's really weird.
Yeah, I think they only had like
The forms, yeah.
700 there living in tents.
Right.
But to try and say that you're not gonna have a deficit, but you're starting with nothing, unless they get crazy donations, I don't see how they could start to even generate a kind of
Right. Build infrastructure.
kinda
or anything
GDP.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, and they talked about we're gonna have all these industry buildings and all that, and we got all these like specialists coming in, but they don't have any of these buildings yet. And to even get that started, unless you, I mean, I guess it's possible they could get these kinds of people who are just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna build these buildings for free for you guys because this is gonna be like my country, our thing.
Right. Well, the advantage
But-
is if you have over 100,000, 200,000 applicants, you only
Right.
let in the people who are best. Which is one thing that makes the idea somewhat feasible is that you get to pick and choose who comes in.
Right.
Right.
And really my point for the feasibility of putting no deficit in the Constitution. Now that's in the Constitution, not just as a good idea. I mean, obviously, I think no deficit is a good idea. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But I think that to do it on a large scale, it's just something that I don't think warrants a line in the Constitution. Just because there are, you could come up with scenarios where a deficit is something that, you would need to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think and especially in a country like ours, where if you want to do a constitutional amendment, it's almost impossible to make a constitutional amendment at this point. And I think that was really more my point is for an actual country. And that's one of the things we did in the video was compare Liberland policy to policies that would work in a real
Well,
place.
in the U.S., actually, there was a big rivalry or disagreement between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson when the
Yeah.
country started, because Thomas Jefferson did not want a national debt and did not want a central bank.
Yeah.
But Alexander Hamilton was very much in favor of those ideas.
Well, I can agree with no central bank.
Yeah.
Certainly.
But that I think it becomes a slippery slope where
Sure.
you allow for a national debt, and then every generation is going to push that a little further and further, or double the national debt every year. Now we have an $18 trillion debt.
Right,
How are
right.
we going to ever repay that?
Well, I mean, there are potential theoretical models like, not cutting spending, but, a spending freeze where you don't increase spending.
Well, yeah, that's the thing too. Is we increase spending
Right,
in
I
every
think,
sector every year.
The problem is that people, the consumer nature of our country is really pretty unique in the world. Where this idea that if everyone just kind of stayed where they were for like 10 years, we'd be fine. And then economically we'd be all right. But everyone is and one of the reasons that I am a conservative is because I don't want to spend more money. I want to spend less money, but it's just a constitutional amendment or having it in the Constitution for me is just too cut and dry. It's like, I don't think that you should cut someone off in traffic, but I don't want to put that in the Bible,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's a scenario where that would be, the right thing to do. But I to be fair, I can't think of a scenario in which I would want a deficit.
So there's another thing in there where they said in their constitution, if 3% of the citizens oppose a bill, it will be up for referendum.
Right.
So you said that was a bad thing, but I would ask you, don't you think it's a good thing to avoid a tyranny of the majority? Like even if you have, a somewhat substantial minority, because 3%, it doesn't sound like much, but if you had a third party candidate in the US who got 3% of the vote, that would be kind of a big deal. So, wouldn't that be kind of a good thing to avoid a tyranny of the majority where you actually had referendums on things?
Well, part of it is for liberal land. 3% is like 2 people.
Right. But for the U.S., it would be like 9 million people.
Right, for the U.S. And then there's still problems with that. And I don't even know that I think it would be totally terrible, but it's still problems with that. So like 95% of when Obama ran for first, I think it was first term or second term, 95% of black voters voted for Obama.
Right.
Which is psycho. I mean, it really is psycho. And it gets so much into identity politics and things like that. And I think when it comes down to it, you can get 9 million people to agree on a lot. And so our politics is already incredibly slow. And it's a good thing that it's slow, because then you don't get crazy things just shoved through. You're not supposed to, you do. But and I think if you have that much bogging down the system even more, I think it's going to do the opposite of stopping tyranny. I think it's going to bog up the system, and then the people who are wealthy and who can influence things are the ones who get things pushed through.
But not only that, but I mean, if you have 3 people question
and you'll never get it's people aren't reliable.
If you have 3 people question it, I mean, I suppose theoretically you could have others get on board, and those were just the vocal ones.
Yeah.
But I mean, if the opposition is still 97%, then your referendum doesn't do anything.
Right, you have to. I mean,
well, that's the thing too. Is
it's a pretty small.
It's only to even have a referendum.
Right.
So they're just saying you need 3% of the vote to push it forward into a referendum.
Right. But I mean, you'd have to vote, or you'd have to hope that everybody else would come to see reason on that.
Right, but the idea is that if you just give it a referendum and then you let them give their best shot, and if everyone still disagrees, they disagree. And in reality, I don't think it would honestly make much of a difference, except that it would slow things down. You're not going to take, I mean, if anything, we can see very clearly that people don't tend to change their opinions very often.
Right. Especially since if it is such a small amount, because most of this...
That's a big hill to climb.
Most of the government right now in Liberland, when we were doing that research, was the founder and like his buds and all that.
Right.
So I mean...
Well, that's kind of the weird thing too. And there's actually something analogous to that, I think, in the libertarian movement in the U.S. is Ayn Rand. I don't know if you're familiar with her at all.
Yeah.
But she had a very close group of followers who would kind of do anything she said. And it's funny, too, because she's nominally a libertarian. But people, for example, she'd smoke cigarettes. I think there's something in her writings where she was writing about smoking a cigarette like you're holding the torch of Prometheus or something. So all of her followers would smoke cigarettes also. So it's or like a lot of them changed their last names to be like a form of, or they would include her last name inside of it or something.
That's crazy.
Psycho.
Yeah,
that's kind of like The Following.
Yeah.
What's The Following?
The TV show? The Following.
Yeah,
it's about serial killers and people basically who imitate serial killers.
They imitate this author and they just like kill people for him.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a good show. Kevin Bacon.
Oh, really? I'm glad he's getting work. He hasn't been in the movies for a while.
Yeah. It's not quite
Not quite Footloose.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's that other movie that Kevin Bacon's in that starts with foot.
All right. So let's segue there. Actually, I have a good question based on that because we just had a little technical glitch there.
Mm-hmm.
You had a couple episodes where the video cut out. What happened there?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just curious what happened.
So that is a combination of either battery or memory.
Or his fiance.
Oh, yes, or that.
She used to call a lot.
I recorded it on my phone.
So it would
and then
stop it.
Wait, you record the video on your
Some
phone?
of them are on that. Some of that's on a cell phone.
Really?
Yeah.
Some good quality video.
I think most of them are.
No, 4. Yeah, most of them
There's
are on
probably
a cell phone.
2 that were on a camera, but it didn't work for us.
Yeah, it didn't. The audio got messed up. So.
Yeah. But
most of them are on a phone. No, 4, man. Samsung. Those
funny
South
panda
Koreans
video in there.
know what they're doing.
And the penguins.
Yes, yeah, that's my favorite podcast where it goes out and then the penguin and then the what was it? It was a panda
There's
or
a
something?
panda sliding.
Yeah, slides down the
Yeah.
forest. Nobody thought that was as funny as I did.
I thought it was
Well,
funny.
you know what made it funnier is the name of that video was The Dead Planet. So it's like your video died. It's kind of ironic.
There we go.
Yeah.
It was on purpose. It was
And that's what she
ironic.
lives with the dead planet.
There
It
we
was-
go.
So let's talk about
That's
that.
all that'll be left.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
that podcast. Johnny, on that one, you criticized the idea of black holes and multiple universes
Sure.
as belief.
Sort of.
So, which I kind of get. I understand it's all theoretical, and
Right.
I'm with you on that. But coming from it, from a religious point of view,
Sure.
why is that belief any less valid than religious beliefs?
I don't necessarily think that it is any less
Okay.
valid.
No.
I don't think so. Like I've never been someone, or maybe not never, but I'm not now someone who's in the business of trying to convince people to believe something they don't believe.
Okay.
I don't think belief is a choice. I don't think it's something you choose because I couldn't choose not to believe if I wanted to. I mean, certainly if brought with new evidence, my belief could change, certainly, but I can't make a cognitive choice knowing what I know to just switch my belief. So I don't necessarily think it's less valid, but I do think that it needs to have the validity that it deserves.
Right.
So a lot of times what a lot of the criticism of religion in general is that it's authority based. It's very authority based. So you believe this because your pastor told you, or you believe this because your bishop or your imam or whatever told you. And I think we've gotten that way a lot in science, where I believe in this because I heard a scientist tell me this. Most scientists believe in this or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
And especially when you get to theoretical physics, where essentially, especially like multiple universes, it's just because something fits and it doesn't have any internal fallacies doesn't make it true, right? So any worldview from the inside makes sense, but it doesn't make it true.
It is supposed to be based on observation of the
Yeah.
natural world, right?
Well, I wouldn't say. I mean,
So like they take
Black
telescopes, they
holes,
look,
sure.
they see all this stuff seems to be falling into this one point in
Right.
space. So it must be a black hole, and then they start speculating on what
Right.
that could be.
well, I definitely think black holes has a lot more validity than multiple universes.
Yeah.
Right.
Because multiple universes, literally, the only evidence for it that I've been presented or I've seen is entirely speculation.
Right.
That if this was, this could be or would be, and there's really, I see no reason to believe it. And I don't necessarily see a reason to believe religion either. Not one that would be concrete, except for maybe personal experience. But that's anecdotal and isn't evidence for other people, and I get that. But I don't feel the need to prove things to other people. Not in that way, anyway. And then black holes, like you said, you see gravity, you see the pull of gravity, you see, it looks like things are being pulled in this way. And I mean, we say that, but it's not like we're seeing things move in the sky. They're talking about slight alterations that are only calculated because we calculate the radius, the sun spinning on its axis, spinning around the sun, and then we calculate using math that this has moved whatever distance.
Right.
So it's all very when you see someone on Facebook say, we could live in multiple universes and this would be like this, and they say it as if it's like really plausible instead of just something someone thought up of. That was more my point, was that there's this tendency to say when a scientist says something, it's true.
And I agree with that. I do see quotes, especially by Stephen Hawking,
Yeah.
kind of used as, this must be true because this guy said it.
Right. I've always said the only reason to put the name of someone who you're quoting at the bottom is to give them credit, not to give the quote validity.
Right.
'Cause
Exactly.
They can be wrong.
Because
Yeah.
even, Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein, they've still advanced,
Well, Newton was wrong.
Yeah.
His whole theory of physics was all wrong.
Right.
And it works for us. And we talk about this in one of the podcasts we haven't
Yeah,
released
last
yet.
one, I
Yeah.
think.
It is
Well, it wasn't wrong. It's just incomplete.
right.
Right.
It's not.
Inconsistent.
Yeah. It doesn't. It works on Earth, but then when you get out there, it's like,
Right.
that's not quite right. But it's just, and a lot of people will use that in a religious sense to make things like one of the ones we haven't released yet. I think we're doing it next week. Is it's about evolution and about the origin of the species and things like that. And a lot of people will use arguments like, the God of the gap arguments and things like that to deny everything someone says. And I don't think that denies it, but I think it certainly gives you a grain of salt. So you're not trusting someone completely based on something that you don't even understand.
Right.
it's sketchy, I think is what I would say. Not that it's, totally unuseful.
So
Right.
something else that you said on that podcast was that finding life on other planets would help prove God. Um, but you also said intelligent life would bother me a bit. So I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts on that. So why would finding life on other planets help prove God, but why would intelligent life kind of
Right.
not
So
be comfortable?
right. So there's a difference between life and intelligent life.
Right. Certainly.
So the idea of part of the reason we talked about that is if you look at the statistical probability of, of natural selection and evolution, and even if not even that, if you just go to the origins of the planets
Right.
and the origin of the species and what would happen, what would have to occur for proteins to form and things like that, if it's possible, it's ridiculously unlikely. And of course, when you bring that to someone who is not a theist, an atheist or an agnostic, they would tell you, oh, well, of course, but we're just the one that got it. And you wouldn't ask the question if you didn't exist. So it doesn't mean anything. And that's sure. But that does mean that if it's that unlikely, it's pretty freaking unlikely that it happened somewhere else.
Yeah.
Now, especially because, the estimates of the age of the universe, 4 billion years ish, it's pretty unlikely.
14.
Right. It really doesn't even matter. It'd have to be like trillions. It's pretty ridiculously unlikely for it to have happened twice, and for it to have happened twice and then have maintained the level of relative peace and tranquility needed for life to advance to the point where we are or way beyond. I think it's pretty unlikely. And people will say things like, "Well, there's billions of billions." I saw it the other day. There's an article saying there could possibly be billions of Earth-like planets that are suitable for life, which just means they're close. They're in the Goldilocks zones, close enough to the sun, but not too
Right.
close.
Yeah.
And they say could be, but even that number is simply not enough.
Right.
It's just simply not enough. And I think in that sense, if there was life, for me, it would say, oh, well, it wasn't just chance because this is ridiculous odds for this to happen twice. And then, but if there's intelligent life, that bothers me maybe on like on a more Christian level
Right.
than a logical
I get that.
level where it's like, oh, well, he didn't
What's our
give
specialty?
me any kind of
What-
hint about this. And I'm not super obsessed with like human uniqueness either. It's just kind of like, it just doesn't really, it brings up more questions, I guess, is what I would say. And I guess as a human being that unsettles me a little bit. Maybe that's my, ancient brain, my lower brain
get
getting
that.
bothered by change, but it's
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Well, I guess one thing that might be relevant to that is time and space, either being finite or infinite. Because it used to be that materialists who didn't believe in God necessarily believed that the universe was eternal and always had existed. And the Big Bang and the proving of the Big Bang I've read actually was it kind of bolstered Catholic beliefs at the time, or what the Catholic Church had said, because it proved that there was a beginning to the universe.
Sure.
I don't know
Right.
about how the
I read the
Protestant view, what the Protestant view would be of the Big Bang necessarily.
Pretty varied.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's also this theory that that because energy and matter cannot be destroyed, the universe doesn't really. It never came into being. It just it expands and retracts and expands and retracts forever. Which again is just theory, but
Right.
I guess I'd just be interested in what your viewpoints on that would be. Or generally, I mean, so when you have like these observations of the material world and people are trying to figure out, where did we come from and all this stuff, and then you have these religious texts, that say these things. How do you kind of balance them out, and how do you give more credence to the text than, I guess, postulating on possibilities based on the physical world?
Do we want to give away what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks? Show our cards beforehand. How much do our listeners overlap, you think?
Yeah. Well, I think
99%.
I think I think for some of that,
We differ on this a little bit for the record.
yeah.
Okay.
Which was the crisis for me. I didn't know.
You guys don't have to agree on everything.
We
It's
don't.
okay.
We don't.
No.
We don't.
We disagree on a lot.
Oh, Yeah, some things.
The important things.
I don't like your face, so there's
Like I like Elder Scrolls more. You're
that's true. I'm more of a Fallout kind of guy.
He convinced me to PlayStation though, so
Yes.
But going back to your question, I think part of that is at least for me was kind of realizing that a lot of this could be perspective based. So what I mean is that when you get people talking about and again kind of what John's saying, this isn't really like a concrete proof you can just present and be like, oh, look at this, like this is like you can't deny this.
Yeah.
It's kind of more like a like, well, in and of itself it would make sense, kind of like what we just talked about parallel universes and
Right.
all that. So it's not really falsifiable, but it's consistent enough within its own theory that at least it provides a grain of salt for me. So
Okay.
part of that would be the interior logic that I have seen in the Bible in regards to I guess prophecy and kind of foretelling
Sure.
between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I guess on a grander scale, I would have to say that again, I understand that this is kind of just like a like it could be seen as a cop out, but
It is seen as a cop-out. I know what you're gonna say, and it is seen as a cop-out.
I'm a fan of the
I'm okay with it, but
I'm a fan of the teleological argument, and that everything has to have a beginning, or at least something had to have brought something about. And I was watching the Bill Nye and the Ken Ham debate, and they actually brought that up.
I wanted to vomit through like 90% of that debate. For the record.
We don't like Ken Ham. He was.
I don't like Bill Nye a lot. I mean, as a kid, I
understand
love
that
Bill
too.
Nye. I can't
Yeah.
help it. It's
Right. And
nostalgic.
He was saying some stuff that simply wasn't true either. Like his understanding of the Bible wasn't right.
The
But
origins of
but I mean, Ken Ham he brought up like the teleological argument. He's like, well, where did this all come from? And Bill Nye was just like, well, we don't know. That's what we're excited about. We're excited to like try and figure this out.
right.
Okay.
But so it's kind of like, all right, well, you know, you guys both kind of have, I mean, neither of you guys are wrong. You know, it's kind of just a, like, I think the big thing for me is that, and me and John actually talked about this in one of the latest podcasts, is that miracles are hard to justify your own point with, but at the same time, it's kind of a necessity within that logic.
Right. Well, you can't. I mean, you'll never be able to prove a miracle, right? That's the
Exactly.
whole point. And there are a lot of people who have tried to do things where.
But isn't that like these theories that you're saying that you can't
Sure.
prove or disprove?
Yeah. Well, that's why I wouldn't call
Yeah.
my Christianity a theory.
Yeah.
And I have no problem with people believing in parallel universes or anything like that. I just have a problem with people putting them up on a scientific pedestal that they don't belong on.
But don't religious people do that?
Oh, certainly.
You put your faith up as objective truth.
Yeah, well, certainly people do. I think for me, I'll just give away what we talked about in the podcast. There's no other way to do this. For me, like, I mean, I've made no bones, no secrets. You know, I was raised as a pastor's son, and I was still in the church and stuff like that. But I don't necessarily I'm learned enough that I don't necessarily take a view of the Bible that I would call, I don't want to say infallible. It's hard to say. I don't use words like infallible and inherent because I don't find them useful.
All right.
I mean, what I mean by that is there certainly are times in the Bible that if you took them strictly as like Muslims take the Quran, they would seem like contradictions. Like times where it says 10,000 soldiers, and then speaking of the same event, it says like 11,000 soldiers. So obviously, we're not going to deal with specifics like that. And I think it's too much to expect Scripture to say that. Or in Leviticus, which is supposed to be written by Moses, he says this is the time before the kings. And, well, how could he have written about kings if he didn't know kings existed because he was dead before they came along? So obviously, you know, you can't take it that way. And I don't necessarily take it that way. And I don't necessarily concretely land on a 6-day creation. God rested on the 7th.
Well,
and
that,
Adam,
that is one thing I have to say in defense of some parts of the Bible is that, especially like the creation, is Jesus speaks in parables all the
Right.
time. So, why wouldn't, God created the world in 6 days. Why wouldn't that be some kind of parable
right. Well,
or
and
analogy
it says
or something?
it says on the day that Adam meets Eve, it says it's one of my favorite parts of the Bible. Actually, is it says that Adam names all the animals on Earth, and so there's 8.1 or 8.7 million species on Earth. Now you can say
Yeah.
cross whatever. There's a lot less because they breed out, and then you can take out
like birds.
right. You can take out birds and you can take out fish of the sea because there's kind of a separation in Genesis of those. But even still, there's no way you're going to be able to name all the creatures on the planet in a
Yep.
day. It's unfeasible. And so, do I really think that that's what was meant to be said there? Probably not. But at the same time, there are things in just strictly in strict evolution that I find problematic. And I mean, we could give away a lot if we went into that. But there are things that I find problematic.
Well, isn't
Yeah,
intelligent
strict
design that God is kind of the driving force behind evolution?
Right. And some of my issues are solved by that and some of them aren't. Like my big one is, so there's, like I said, there's I don't remember if it's 8.1 or 8.7, but 8.1 or 8.7 million species on Earth. That's the estimates. Obviously they haven't counted that. That's the estimates. Now, if we go back to accepted timelines, evolutionary timelines of the first single-celled organism, and we assume, obviously everything I'm going to say right now isn't true, but assume it because it's the best case for evolution. Assume that every organism is a single-celled organism and they're only one gene apart. Now, obviously we know that's not true. Everyone at this table is more than one gene apart, but assume that's true. It's one gene apart. So if they evolved, now again, I know this isn't true, but if they all evolved one at a time in order, you'd have to have a significant gene mutation every 114, 115 years. Now, obviously, you say that, and it's like, oh, no, of course. As they would evolve simultaneously, and as the evolutionary tree gets bigger, you have more and more happening at once. Now, the problem with that is that basically what that's claiming is that there's more gene mutation happening than what I said. So and if you take that, and over the course of 10,000 years of recorded human history-ish, depending on what you count as recorded human history,
right,
we haven't seen any significant gene mutations.
That's not true. Look at like germs and stuff. Germs mutate all the time.
Yeah, but that's not significant gene mutation. I'm saying that you have seen single cells, yeah, but you haven't seen single cells in complex organisms. Was what we're talking about. And by the way, that 8.1 million, 8.7 million, that's not counting any species that have come extinct, like all the ancient man, Paleolithic man, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, all of those isn't included in that number. So that number is even larger than that. And so it just, for me, it's the opposite. It doesn't seem like enough time.
So you're saying that you do not believe in evolution?
I'm saying that I'm stuck somewhere in the middle where I'm like, they don't really. I see problems with both, and I wouldn't say I'm comfortable in that middle, but I'm not comfortable claiming to be either one at this point either.
Mm.
And
that's fair enough. I mean, that makes sense to me.
A lot of tension there.
No, I kind of agree with you in some points. See, my perspective is, I think that lots of people who identify as like atheist or agnostic, I don't think that they're necessarily, what we might term as anti-spiritual. I
Sure.
think that they just might have a problem with biblical texts that say things like you should stone all the adulterers or whatever and
Yeah.
homosexuals and whatnot.
Well, we could go into a whole
Yeah.
biblical defense of a lot of that stuff. I don't know how much we want to go into that. I spent a lot of time on that.
That's
and-
that's always a tricky conversation to have because I mean there's a lot of times I've had arguments with people online and they always just take like one
That's
Bible
because
verse
they've
and
only
it's always-
read that one.
right
verse
it's
'cause
always
they
out of
Googled it.
context. Like I had one this girl was trying to defend that the Bible didn't speak out against homosexuality, and she was trying to like point out the Greek translation. And in fact, the very website, I think it was the Strong's
Concordance.
concordance,
Yeah.
kind of proved herself wrong because she misread it. But even without that, her logic just didn't make sense because the whole thing was taken completely out of context. And
She was saying that the Bible did not speak out against homosexuality.
Yeah, she was.
Well, I would say, what was she talking about, the Old Testament or New Testament? Because there's very few people who will make the argument that the Old Testament.
She was talking
I mean,
about.
there are like,
She was talking
certain
about.
branches of
She's like,
Protestantism.
oh, even in the New Testament, like it doesn't do it. And she was talking about when Paul was.
Doesn't Leviticus
Paul.
and Deuteronomy don't those books have? I wish I had the
Yeah, they
text
they
in
for
front of
sure
me.
they do. The idea though is that there really was, and this is kind of true in a way, that there was not this idea of monogamous homosexual relationships in ancient times.
Okay.
So like Greek is a perfect example, or Rome is an even better example, where in Rome it was all about dominance and masculinity. So no one would be like, you had sex with a dude.
So you're saying men didn't fall in love with each other, or women didn't fall in love with each other in ancient
Well,
Rome?
it wasn't their culture. Whether or not that's what happened is totally different. So we have this idea, this falling in love, where we put falling in love and sex kind of in the same category, and we know they're not. Because so the culture of their time is that they would never say, you had sex with a dude, what a homo. They wouldn't say things like that. They'd say things. So as long as you were dominant, you were the man. So whether or not you were having sex with a boy, literally a boy, or a man or a woman, as long as you were the dominant, I mean, physically dominant in the exchange,
Right.
that was considered a good thing. And so they didn't have relationships the way we did. They didn't have established monogamous relationships. So the argument that they would make from that is that because they didn't have monogamous relationship, Paul and Leviticus, they're not talking about this. They're talking about like rape and things like that. And I get that, except that the Bible gives reasons that don't include that. It gives explanations. Like it talks about what's natural to lie with a man and a woman.
Right.
And I mean, it's difficult. I've never had a conversation with someone who said that though, and who really defended it.
But the vitriol in the Bible
Sure.
against these kinds of sins, like you should be stoned to death by the community.
Sure.
Or there's other parts of the Bible too where, take the Great Flood, for example. The whole
Sure.
world got drowned. Babies got drowned because the culture was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, is that objectively good? Is that really moral?
Well, it's not. Paul talks about it in Romans.
Well, you're gonna go Romans 8, Romans 9 here.
Yeah. He just says
That's not.
what?
You'll win no one over with Romans 9.
I know I won't.
Romans 9 is like, I did it. Get over it. What?
Yeah, exactly. Romans 9. Paul's like, you can't question God.
He's not really talking about the flood, for the record, but
I understand that. But going back to what you were just talking about the kind of like the cleansing time of Israel. It was exactly that.
Pretty way to say it.
Within biblical logic, they were God's chosen people, the Israelites, and God set apart this land for them. And He said, and basically
No, it was the whole world.
not the flood. He's not talking about the flood.
No, I'm talking about the stoning and all that.
Okay, sorry.
So for all that, basically it was just God's plan to get rid of, I guess, the people that.
But shouldn't there
would
be
have
an objective standard of morality? I mean, shouldn't stoning people be either good or evil?
Well, I think life's a lot more complex, I think, than what should and what shouldn't be. And I think it's important to take into account that we're talking about basically a wandering tribe of herdsmen and ancient farmers.
So you're saying the rules that apply to them don't apply to everyone else?
What I'm saying is that, yeah, in a way, but I probably would flush it out a little more than that. Is that so a really good example is stoning witches, right? Where it says if there's a witch, stone her. Now it's important to understand that pagan Wiccans are not who he's talking about. Because we call Wiccans witches and it has been translated witches, doesn't mean it's the same thing. I mean, these are pagans who often engaged in ritual, fetal sacrifices and stuff, and infant sacrifices. And that's a huge difference than just someone who is, believes in Celtic, gods and loves nature. That's a very different thing. And also, I think it's important to keep in mind that so when you have someone who commits adultery or who, and adultery is a much bigger deal to them than it is to us, obviously, but who steals or who hits somebody or anything like that, what are you going to do when you're a wandering tribe of herdsmen in the desert? I mean, you can either let it go, you can jail them, or you can have some kind of physical retribution. And I think it's unreasonable for us to put the standards that we have now as a civilization, one of the biggest civilizations in the world, who has access. We could put somebody in jail for the rest of their life and it'd be fine, onto a wandering tribe of herdsmen who's stuck like, we got to do something. And I think also it's important to keep in mind that there's a lot of elevation that happens. So like an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth was a crazy thing in the time period.
I agree.
Where it was like, you do whatever you want. If you're the biggest and strongest, you win. And there's a lot of things in there that, taken into the context of us, are wrong. Like the idea of if a woman's raped, then she has to marry the man that rapes her. To us, that sounds terrible, but to their culture, if a woman is raped,
she would have nothing.
She'd have nothing, and she'd end up dead on the street, or a prostitute, or both. And it's not a perfect solution, but I mean, what other solution do they have? It's kind of my point. And I really think that it's very much. And anyway, in any case, I'm not a Jew. I definitely believe in the fulfillment of the law through Jesus, and that, he has said, he didn't say I've come to keep the law. He said I've come to fulfill the law. And I think he does. And I think for that reason, he also says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it was, I would come with conquering armies. And I think the point of that is that Christianity is not meant to be, it's not meant to be theocratic anymore.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough. All right. Well, I do want to have some final thoughts, but we're going to take one more break. We're going to hear some more music by Mike Messervy, and then I do want to come back to talk about one other podcast that you guys did. So we're back. Well, first off, John, I wanted to ask you a question because one of my favorite podcasts, one of my favorite things on the internet, is the Robocast.
Okay.
Have you listened to the Robocast yet?
I have not.
No,
I really haven't.
I never heard of it.
So for the record, John's brother-in-law
Correct.
has a podcast, and it's called the Robocast. I was actually a guest on that.
I heard that.
That's what kind of whetted my appetite to get my own podcast.
Yep.
And I can't believe you ever listened to any of them. He's had some really good ones.
I don't know where to find him. He doesn't promote himself enough.
He doesn't want us on his podcast.
Well, he's been on hiatus is the thing. We recorded the last episode that you can find on YouTube currently is episode, Steve, what is it, 5? No, I think it's 7. It's episode 7. It's on YouTube.
7 episodes is pretty good.
Yeah, it's more than me currently, so.
I don't know where we're at. We're like 14.
Yeah, you guys are 14, I think.
Something like that.
We're going to be at 16 then.
Eventually, if they ever go up.
But I was a guest on his show. We talked about central banking.
Okay.
I'm actually curious. I wanted to get into our final thoughts here, but just a quick segue. You said before that you're against central banks.
I thought this was going to be lighthearted. No.
Serious before lighthearted.
I don't like the word. I guess the best way to describe myself would be a libertarian leaning conservative.
You're a right libertarian.
Right. But I'm not. I mean, yeah, that's probably the best way. But not libertarian because there are things I think, hey, we need government for this. But
libertarian doesn't mean anarchist.
No, I know, but there's a lot of libertarians who are a little more libertarian than I am. Like, I don't know necessarily that it's a good thing for us to legalize everything.
Yeah.
Certainly more than is legal, but maybe not everything. But as central banks, anytime anything, I don't believe in having anything centralized.
Yeah.
Essentially. And I think anytime you give all the power, all the influence, all the money, all the lending power to anyone, that's a problem. And I think that I can't really think of an exception to that.
Right.
Well, that's another thing too, is, in talking about this left-right paradigm, I think that central banks are a good example of where that kind of imagined political spectrum breaks down, because you have the government empowering this private bank to be able to print the currency of the nation and be able to put the nation into debt. So, if you're against that, what does that mean you are? Are you on the left or are you on the right?
Right. Well, I think that's one of the issues where it's important to have. It doesn't really help voting too much, but it's why, we have authoritarian, libertarian. And I think it was kind of hilarious that Political Compass, it's a website, and then it's also
it's called the Nolan chart. Actually, it's like a diamond.
Right. Yeah. And they actually put me as a slightly left-leaning libertarian.
Really?
We were both in the same spot.
Which I thought was kind of funny, because I was like, really? Like, anyone know? I've never had anyone be like, you're kind of a leftist. Like, that's...
I don't know if that thing's completely accurate.
I don't know either. I don't think it weighs things.
No, I definitely don't.
But I certainly agree that left and right aren't completely adequate, but unfortunately it's...
Because they do agree at times, too.
It is what it is.
I mean, I've seen joint press conferences with Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich, or Ron Paul and Ralph Nader. They
have to pretend like they don't, though.
They have to pretend like what?
They have to pretend like they don't agree. I mean, they have to, it's a ridiculous game. They have to pretend like they all want to be bipartisan and that everyone else doesn't want to be bipartisan, and it's kind of.
So from here, my political perspective is that we see this partnership between big business and big government all the time in a lot of things. And the best example of that is the Federal Reserve or central banks.
Okay.
And, I think that partnership should be limited. I think that you should try to stop, lobbyists from being able to pass all these laws, or a lot of regulation that you see.
Mm-hmm.
There's calls on the left all the time for more regulation is better because it'll kind of help us out, but it really doesn't. What it does is it helps big businesses cut out competition from small business who can't compete with them.
Right.
So like minimum wage laws, for example. Like if you did raise the minimum wage, and you actually talked about this on episode 2, Rise of the Machines.
Yeah.
If you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, what you'd actually do is, for businesses who can afford to pay that, like McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's, you would help them out because all the small mom and pop, all the Harry's places, they can't afford to pay that.
Right.
No, of course not.
So they'd go out of business.
That's primarily why we don't like. Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we don't like Bernie Sanders and his platform.
Okay.
And I was actually talking to my crazy.
Not that he'll ever be able to pass a bill that.
Right. Exactly.
raises
Well, that's the
minimum
thing. I was talking to my crazy stepdad about it, and
You're
that's
crazy.
that's the
stepdad.
preface that goes anytime I mention.
If
him.
you didn't say that, we wouldn't know which
Yeah.
stepdad you were talking.
Well, that's the main descriptor.
No,
but
it's pretty accurate.
But I mean, I was talking to him about it, and I mean, it was as soon as I said I don't like Bernie Sanders, he starts blowing up. But
He's like a right-leaning conservative, except that the opposite direction. So it's like those old people who only
that
watch
mean?
Fox News. He's the
Yeah.
opposite of that.
he's like a HuffPo conspirator. That's exactly what he is. But I was telling him, I'm like, well, you know, if you raise the minimum wage, like you just said, what we talked about before, is that all the big businesses that can afford it are either going to be like, all right, well, we can take more people under our wing, or eventually they just be like, you know what, it'd be more cost effective to get like some kind of technological advantage
Right.
over a person.
I don't know that McDonald's could even afford it.
Right.
This year alone, they're closing 700 restaurants.
Yeah.
And they were down in profits for like last 2 or 3 quarters. And I think, I mean, certainly they could afford it more than like a Harry's Place, something like that. But I don't think I think it's an unreasonable thing to jump to.
The point is that their entire business model is based on government handouts because even McDonald's or any of those guys, beef is massively subsidized by the federal government. And beef should not be as cheap as it is in the U.S. And the only reason it is because the federal government keeps going more and more in debt every year.
Right. Same thing with big farms, the same exact thing.
Exactly.
And that's where my libertarian comes out, where it's like, why are we subsidizing anything?
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you can't hack it, you can't hack it. But that's, I don't necessarily. My problem with Bernie Sanders is, and it's why I can't identify totally as a libertarian, or with certainly not with someone like Bernie Sanders, who would call himself a democratic socialist, is that I don't think the answer is to give the government more power and more money. So it's like if mom and dad are both abusive, you don't take the money from mom and give it to dad. Like that doesn't solve the problem.
Exactly.
And that's where I'm like, and I think that's what's really funny about it is that most of the supporters, people who I know who support Bernie Sanders, were people who have supported Ron Paul. And it's like, they're similar in some ways, but in a lot of ways, they're very, very different.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think a lot of the reasons that people really, and when you get down to brass tacks, support both of them is that both of them haven't changed and that they've been pretty reliable in their convictions.
Well, going back to what I was saying, the problem with this whole minimum wage thing for me is I haven't heard a convincing argument why we should have it, because like you just said, small businesses wouldn't be able to afford this.
Right.
So a lot of them would just be like, well, we're SOL, we can't do anything, and they would collapse.
Or they just have brains, and once they start going through a cell.
Exactly. And when I was talking to people about this, they're like, oh, well, of course there's going to be a small kickback, but then we're going to rebound. And I'm like, well,
that's such a
not
douchey
really
thing to say.
Yeah,
like, obviously you're going to lose your
yeah.
job and be impoverished.
And it's like, well, not really, when, so many of these people that were, kind of hoping for this this minimum wage increase are now going to be kicked out of these jobs because they work for small companies that can't afford it. And then you're going to have more homeless people, and there's not going to be a kickback because there's going to be too much going to try and support them. And I was talking to my stepdad about it, and I'm like, not only do you need this to happen, but the three main points that I identified with Sanders, the minimum wage, the free college, and
Healthcare.
And
I mean, those are the
healthcare,
three big ones.
they kind of basically have to all get passed at the same time. Otherwise, well, I don't know about the healthcare, but I know that the education and the minimum wage one would kind of have to get passed at the same time, which is crazy because we have a Republican-controlled Congress. And
well, it's a lot of promises that he's not going to be able to keep.
It is. And
even if he wants to, he's not for a few years at least.
And even with education, I mean, I believe that it shouldn't be free because I think you have
Sure.
to spend money to make money. You need something to kind of drive a a competition among colleges and to make them kind of improve the educational experience that they provide. And I think that if you just made it all free, you would see either, I don't know if degrees would become less valuable, but I think that could
I think they would be.
I
mean
think that
that's
definitely could
they
happen.
already are less valuable
Right.
now because government has allowed student loans to become so accessible.
Well, yeah. Well,
That's why we were saying
exactly.
like an English degree is worth nothing.
Right.
Like, people, if you're listening, do not get an English degree
Or gender studies.
Yeah. The thing is, well, I mean, and like you said, the whole reason that these loans cost so much is because these loans are guaranteed by the federal government. So if they guarantee up to $30,000 from the federal government, the school knows they can get it, so
Right.
they're going to get it. And the thing is, if the federal government puts a cap on that, where it's the same thing as subsidizing farms or subsidizing beef, they're essentially subsidizing 4-year education, and that's why you have all these kids getting useless degrees and not working when they get out. When the reality is like what's his name from Dirty Jobs is a huge
Mike Rowe.
He's a huge proponent for this, and I think it's really valuable. It's this idea that regular jobs, tradesmen are good jobs, and the majority of people belong in those jobs.
Yeah.
And that's real life. Like this idea that was sold to us as, as kids and as teenagers and as young adults, this idea that everybody can be an astronaut and everybody can work in the top office and everyone can get an education.
Not
It's
possible.
It's just not real life. You need a middle class. That's how real life works. Not everyone is a superstar. And I think you ultimately damage everyone when you get that way. And that's why we have whatever $1 trillion we have in college debt right
Well,
now.
I think there are. I think there's definitely a lot of value in degrees, but I think there's a lot of generic ones. So like English.
Yeah.
That tends to be a really generic degree.
Sure.
Right. Just like
I mean,
I want to have a college degree.
Exactly. If you, yeah, I need to post this on the wall. If you specialize in and like, oh, I'm going to be a professor with this or whatever, then that's fine.
Yeah, but you're just a professor of English to further English degrees.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say that for a lot of trade jobs too, though.
Yeah, but those trade jobs at least have some real application in real life. So you're training plumbers to do plumbing, or you're going to train English majors to do English, which is they're just going to train more English people to do more English. It's got no less real world application. And I think that's the issue, is that the majority of these degrees are useless. They really are. I mean, the owner of the company I work for has a bachelor's degree in business, and he told me I've never used it.
Yeah.
Because he didn't need it. I mean, and he got it for a fallback plan, and it's useful to get job interviews sometimes. But for the majority of people and the majority of degrees, the only reason it has any value is because it's invented value that our culture has put on it, where you're more likely to get an interview if you have a BA next to your name.
I would disagree with that,
BS.
because I think a lot of it is kind of like the equivalent of a trade education.
Well, yeah, but not for most of it. It's really not. Like for some of it, certainly if you're talking about STEM fields or our psychology fields, social fields like that, then yeah, obviously you want training, so you're not just telling people crazy things.
I understand like history and English and all that, but
They only exist to educate the people to do it more and to educate more, and it's I don't know. But I think it's been glorified to the point where it's.
But the reason that it's not worth anything is because it's so ubiquitous. So
Right.
that there's tons of English degrees out there, and the reason that it's because that is, the central bank makes credit so easy, and everyone is
Sure.
able to get in debt. Students are
student
able
loans
to
anyway,
get themselves in debt, but everyone, I mean, people are able to get themselves into debt to buy houses. That's what the housing market collapse is about.
Yeah.
And now companies are massively in debt. Everyone has enormous credit card debt.
Yep.
And yeah, just bring it back to the whole minimum wage that we were talking about earlier. That debt causes inflation. So, I was reading this statistic online today about how in 1964 the minimum wage was $1.25. So if you took 5 silver quarters, which was $1.25 back in 1964.
Yeah.
Today, the value of 5 silver quarters would be $2.65 each.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's $13.25 total.
Okay.
So if you had, if you kept up that minimum wage or, that level of wages in the country, that would be $13.25 per hour at least.
Right, but I mean, that's not going to take into account that that's all assuming that everything else that we spend money on has increased with it and hasn't gone down in value or in price.
But what it points out is that the money is broken.
Right, of course.
The money is the problem because, and I think that's what the left doesn't get, or like, the Occupy Wall Street crowd. They
Right.
or Bernie Sanders crowd, they keep saying, raise the minimum wage, but they don't realize that our money is being devalued by the Federal Reserve
Sure, right.
constantly.
Sure. And that's the problem with it, is that so there's this balance between you have to deal with what's going to happen in 10 or 15 years and you have to deal with my family tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think that's the balance there where it's difficult. But I think when it comes down to real life, I still believe, and one of the reasons I think a lot of the ways I do is that I still believe that it's possible to succeed for an individual to succeed if they really want to. Now, in the end, do I think that it's systemically hard for a lot of people to succeed? Maybe, but what I'm most concerned with is me and my family, and I still believe that it's possible for me to succeed because I know people who have, and I know people who have succeeded in ways that weren't extraordinary, but were just, kind of normal.
It depends how you
Well, yeah.
term success,
Right,
too.
right. Well, I mean, not everyone's going to be a millionaire,
Yeah.
And I think, and I was listening to this thing too. I was talking about how in the way we live, the gap between the rich and the poor, although the gap in actual income has never been bigger, the actual gap between the way that we live really is pretty. I mean, compared to history, it's pretty small. So, like,
What do you mean?
the difference between me driving my 2001 Dodge Ram and someone in their 2012 Mercedes, is speed.
But there's a difference between someone living in their 1985 van or,
Yeah,
living
but
in
that's not the majority of people aren't living in a 1985 van.
But the point is that there's a huge income disparity between, and part of that is actually driven again by the Federal Reserve because, I don't know if you've heard this a lot about the disparity between like a CEO pay and the average worker pay in a company.
Yeah.
CEO pay is tied to stock performance.
Sure,
So,
of course.
So during stock bubbles, like during the .com bubble or the housing bubble,
Yep.
CEO pay skyrockets and it gets further and further away from the rate of pay of the average worker.
Right.
But those bubbles are facilitated once again by our central bank.
Right.
So it's just another symptom of the problem.
Right. Well, and it's again the reason that I'm libertarian leaning is whenever the government gets their nasty little hands in things, it screws it up because nature is that's one way that I definitely believe in natural selection. Nature has a tendency to, just the way things fall, is the way things fall. Yeah, well, that's true too. I mean, there's a certain degree of that too, where, economies do rise and fall and it's cyclical in nature. But I think one of the ways that I talked about it before is this idea of like a libertarian and authoritarian is that authoritarian looks at a person who's naturally authoritarian leaning will kind of look at the economy or the world or so whatever, everything as building a computer. And so I need to maintain it, I need to put maintenance on it, make sure it's tweaked here. And someone who's naturally libertarian leaning looks at it more like a plant. Like you water it and you keep it in the sunshine and you let it do its thing.
Right.
And I think that's just intrinsically a better way to run everything. And I think it's a more moral.
Those are some great metaphors.
Thank you. I think it's more moral too. I think people deserve freedom ultimately. Whether if they hang themselves with that freedom, it's still freedom, unfortunately.
Okay, so let's get more lighthearted.
Lighthearted.
After all that.
Whew, shake it off.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be lighthearted because I'm indicting you at the same time. Ethan.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
In episode 2, Rise of the Machines,
Yes.
you said you don't like The Simpsons.
I don't know.
This is like the most sacrilegious thing I
like
can imagine
Futurama.
someone saying.
I like Futurama, so I do like some of Cronin's work.
Okay, what? First, let's take a step back. What year were you guys born?
92.
91.
Okay.
And
So, did you grow up watching The Simpsons?
I grew up.
It's a yes or no question. Stop being
It's a
so
challenge.
political.
I don't know. I could write a thesis paper on this. No, I
The
grew
question
up,
I'm gonna answer is
I grew up and I watched some Simpsons. If that answers anything, some.
It used to be on Fox 61 every night. There used to be
Sure.
at least 2 episodes every night.
I did not watch.
But I was a
did not
dumb
grow
kid,
up watching
so I
Simpsons.
probably
But you didn't say that. Ethan did.
I got tired of it.
I know. I
mean, that's
liked
like I used to see some South Park, and then I just stopped.
Okay.
Try dodging the
So-
question.
No, I don't. I think The Simpsons is unfunny.
So why do you hate America, Ethan?
So
Oh.
here's my perspective on The Simpsons as someone who was born in 1986. So I grew up with The Simpsons, and I agree. I agree that there are a lot of bad Simpsons episodes.
There's so many.
But the stuff from the 90s is great stuff. I don't know if you remember it. I don't know when you started watching, but like, I don't know, seasons. The first couple weren't that great, but seasons like 3 through 7 or 8, those are some great, like really artistic episodes. Like the drawing is really cool. It's neat perspectives and kind of like panning and stuff like that. There's also a lot of really cool cultural references to classic novels or movies. and
That's
stuff
true.
Like
Right.
that.
I know they.
He does that in
reference
Futurama, too.
Yeah.
Matt Groening is obviously a smart man.
Yeah.
And it's just constant, like
Well,
it's bam, bam, bam jokes, and one
That's
after
true.
another.
I never really sat down and watched that much of it, but I'm an American, so I'm opinionated on stuff that I shouldn't be.
But how could you avoid it? How could you avoid watching The Simpsons?
Well, I mean, the '90s had so many awesome TV shows. I
Yeah.
mean,
That's true.
That's true.
I
And
mean,
actually, that was the other.
My parents didn't let me watch The Simpsons.
'99 was when SpongeBob started, so I guess that's not really a '90s show, but that
That's
show was
so-
no. That show used to be really funny, really like more like of a mature funny. And
So
then you had,
this was actually the
That's a
other
funny thing to
podcast yours
say.
that I wanted to bring up. Episode 4, I Will Wear My Cape,
Yes.
which is where you talk about all these 90s fads and
Yes.
TV shows.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, but that's one of the ones we shot like 3 times because it kept messing up.
But actually, in that, when you talked about SpongeBob, you said that you thought SpongeBob was the end of cartoons for you, which I really agree with. But I didn't think that you guys would because you're like 6 years younger than me.
Well, I think
I mean, I don't.
after the movie,
I like cartoons
sucked.
now
After the movie, SpongeBob.
The
sucked.
SpongeBob movie.
Yeah. After that, it just sucked.
with with Hasselhoff.
Yeah. After before
I
that,
didn't even know there was a movie. Was
There's
it in
several.
theaters?
There's several
Yeah.
movies.
I
Well,
did
there
not
was-
know that.
there's
You're
two.
probably better off.
No, I mean anytime before the movie, I could quote so much stuff because it was just funny. But after that, it was just so childish. And but I mean
it
before
was
that,
so serious.
but before that, there were so many good shows out. I mean, you had Invader.
I agree.
Invader
I completely
Sim,
agree. But
And
so that's the thing is like you guys are a little bit after my time.
Yeah.
Like I guess we're like all millennials, but like I feel like we're. Like,
I don't know what that word means. I've been trying to figure out what
I think it means
actually
you were born
qualifies as a
between
millennial.
85 and 2005. I think that's what it. I think that's
85 and
technically-
2004. Really? That
Yeah.
seems so. Like I feel like someone born in 85 and someone born in 2005 have very little
Oh yeah,
in common.
definitely.
vastly different.
But that's like how generational things work. Like I think everyone from like 45 to 65, anybody born then is a baby boomer.
Who's making up these labels? These are ridiculous.
I don't know.
Generation Y, generation. That's
All the
nonsense.
English majors.
Yes.
That's
We gotta
probably-
find something to do.
We gotta justify our department somehow.
Yeah, you guys, you were talking in that podcast about Pokemon and
Yes.
Yu-Gi-Oh! And I
Yes.
have to admit, I don't even know what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is. I've heard of
Wow.
Yu-Gi-Oh!, but I don't even really know what
That's
I'm
it
gonna
is.
really
speculate.
interesting.
You know what magic is, though, right?
Yeah, of course.
Of course, obviously.
I never played it, but that was
What
a
kind of
huge-
loser
I
doesn't
That was
played
a
it on the
huge thing.
Xbox.
You played it on Xbox?
currently? Like, don't say it like it was like 8 years ago.
I
It was
said
like
played. I said play. I didn't say played. They have versions on Xbox.
Really?
which
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me, but I
That's-
don't
Yeah,
know.
isn't the whole thing about buying the cards?
Yeah, so you can
Yeah,
like
but that
hold
one's
it.
better because it's pre-made, so it's more balanced. So you don't have douchebags.
Well, help educate me here. Is Yu-Gi-Oh! A card game
Yes.
Yes.
It's very it's like
Okay.
a card dueling game similar to Magic, but much simpler.
with Pokemon?
It's like Pokemon is to preteen as Yu-Gi-Oh is to teenager.
That makes
Okay.
no sense.
So like
It's a progression. It's like
Yeah,
Pokemon is
right.
more like for like young kids and stuff, and then once you got older, you're like, well, I still like doing that stuff, and then you just play Yu-Gi-Oh.
right, and then when you never find a girlfriend and you're
Yeah,
then you start
then
to
you-
play Magic.
Then you just get rid of
When
it
you
all.
accept that your place in the world is to be alone, then you start playing Magic. I was gonna say I'm kidding, but I'm really not.
Well, that's not my place.
No, I don't play Magic.
Although I did try to hide that I played that. Like the first time I was playing that and she was over, she's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "It's
nothing. It's nothing. It's
I
nothing.
literally didn't say. I was like, "It's a game." And then I dashboarded.
Shit, what's this? What's this in your search history? Magic. I thought I cleared that.
Yeah,
That's real life, man.
it was actually kind of scary.
Yeah, it's like
Am I gonna lose my girlfriend after like 2 months because she knows I play this?
I think that's a little. That I mean, yeah. If she left, that she should be left. Like, yeah. So Yu-Gi-Oh, somewhere between Pokemon and
Or maybe you should stop playing Magic.
Right, yeah.
Maybe that's the life lesson.
Like
I
it's
learned.
it's
You're
like
playing
me or
too
the
much.
dog. It's me or Magic, me or the cards, and you're like,
if that question is like, meh, then you know you should stop.
But I was bring it back to this episode 4 there. I will wear my cape. I was surprised about some of the shows that you guys said you watched. Batman, the animated series.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you guys, because that started in '92. That's when you were born, right?
Yeah. So I mostly I didn't watch. I mean, the great thing about the '90s is that 85% of what was on TV was reruns.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've watched a lot of reruns, and then I've watched it like last year. I watched it all again, and I watched I watched the whole Batman Beyond series in a year. Not a year, last year. I have like this really weird thing where like I can't not do multiple things at once.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll be watching TV while like playing video games or while
We always
editing
do that.
video or anything.
Psychotic.
Yeah, I can't help it. So
He
like
knows everything about comics, though.
that's
so-
not true. Don't put me on that pedestal.
He knows a lot about comics,
Don't put me on
and
that.
I kind of wish I could.
What's
watch
the
those
difference
shows.
between Crisis on Infinite Earths,
It's
Oh,
the
gosh.
Infinite
worst.
Crisis, and whatever the other one is?
I actually, this is a question I can answer, actually.
I know them.
But it would take like 35 minutes. The all you need to know is that Crisis on Infinite Earths is not as good as people say it is,
Yeah.
and it gives you a headache unless you read it
Really-
twice.
It's really.
Come on, man.
It's so
the
stupid.
Anti-Monitor.
Yeah.
But that's
well,
so silly because they kill him and then he comes back and they have to kill him. It's so 80s. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we
How
got
many
him,
times do you
or
fight
he's-
him?
Like Dragon Ball Z, like, this isn't my final form. And then you have to go back after him.
I would say like Terminator.
My
but-
favorite,
well, that's true.
my favorite,
I think that's a
favorite
series that can
Crisis-
die, personally.
I think my favorite
Yeah.
Crisis book was
I didn't even see
Identity.
the new one.
Me neither.
Identity Crisis. That was the good
Identity
one.
Crisis.
Yeah.
I stopped reading comics. Around
That's
like
the only
05.
normal one, though. the thing that makes Crisis on Infinite Earths so hard to read is that, first of all, it's Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's parallel universes are going to blow your mind no matter how you read them.
Is that why
Right.
you're against the idea?
Right, exactly.
Because of the stupid comic.
It left a sour taste in
Because
our
the
mouth.
DC
But
comics.
because when you read it, it doesn't. It makes sense at like the last quarter of the book.
Yeah.
It's like when you watch.
that's how
It's
they
like
all go.
when you saw Fight Club for the first time,
Right.
and at the end you were like, "What? It's not. He's Tim." And then you go back and watch it again, and then everything makes sense
Right.
suddenly. It's the same thing, but like it's a huge comic
Tyler,
book
by
with
the
like a
way.
billion
It's
characters.
not Tim, it's Tyler. Tyler Durden.
Yep.
I didn't. Did I? I said
I said
him.
Tim. I could have sworn he said Tim.
Well, you would be a
My
liar.
respect plummeted. No, I think I was reading like he read all the Crisis books before me. I only read the first one, and then I let him read them. And actually, I read Identity too.
I'm
and
done
then
with
I
this.
had I had him read, but all of them. It's like it doesn't make sense till the last 3 pages, and then you're just like pissed. Like I was stressed out the whole time. I was pissed off.
Yeah.
I wasn't enjoying it.
Really?
I'm like, people just told me this was good, but I hate it.
Well, it's like Fight Club if there was like literally like 50 characters, like
Yeah.
literally like 50 characters that you had to keep track of.
Yeah,
Um,
then they're like, "Oh no, this person died." And
All
you're
coming
like,
in from
I don't know why
all
that's
coming in
important.
from unestablished storylines
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they expect you to have read
All the
all the
different
comics
Earths.
ever.
Yeah, they'd be like, "Oh, remember when this happened in like the Flash issue like 47?" And you're like, "I don't know what the hell happened."
That's to make you buy comics.
Right, of course.
But
And
that's
that's
kinda-
one of the reasons I don't like it.
Yeah, that's like microtransactions in like Xbox games. You know, it just makes
Exactly.
you upset.
In-game purchases. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one wants in-game purchases in their comic books.
Bringing this back to cartoons.
Ooh.
Rocco's Modern Life. I couldn't believe that you guys actually saw that.
I didn't get any of the
Modern
mature
Life.
references.
Rocco's
Well, neither did I,
I
actually.
didn't get them, but
That's the thing about The Simpsons, or I was actually going to ask you guys if you had seen these other shows. So, did you ever watch Animaniacs?
yes.
Yeah, yes.
So, yeah, there are tons of those adult references in there. How about Tiny Toons?
Yep.
You guys have seen that? Wow.
Yeah,
I have. Well, I have 3 older sisters, so
I used to love that show.
Ren and Stimpy.
yep. I wasn't a huge. I didn't like watch it regularly, but I've
I
seen
had
it.
a movie. I remember. This is so weird. I remember. You know how like a lot of dads kind of had like a coming of age like proud moment for like their sons or whatever.
No,
They're
my
like, "I'm
father
proud of
never
you,
had
man."
that.
My dad. This was his. So, me and my brother, because our parents are divorced, so me and my brother don't really see him that much, but like kind of his thing for this was like, oh, you guys are gonna be men. So he had us watch Ren and Stimpy, but it was like a porn one. Like it was legit.
No, they had the new ones
It
in
was-
like 2005.
Yeah, it was legit Ren and Stimpy, but it was like there were like naked women and like,
It's like a
tits
s-
and stuff.
No,
And
on,
like he's
on
like,
Spike TV in like 2005, they redid Ren and Stimpy.
that's what they were. And
Yeah.
he's like, here
That's
you go,
crazy.
guys. This is he's
Doesn't
like,
that
this
kinda
is
ruin
good
it?
stuff. And I was like, what am I like? Why are you proud that I'm watching like cartoon tits and like this is weird? And
That's kind of ruins it, doesn't it? Like the whole point is that you're like,
Yeah.
my 8-year-old watching this doesn't get it. Like,
Yeah,
doesn't that kind of
yeah.
ruin it? I feel like it does. I don't know. I
Well, no,
I
he
watch
did that-
cartoons now.
No, that was when we were like 14. He's like, watch this, guys. It's what being a man's about. And I'm,
That's weird,
What?
man.
It was
like
weird.
Our
It's
our
really weird.
ancestors would be so ashamed of us. They'd be
yeah.
like, "You should be hunting big animals,"
you should be killing lions in
and now
Zimbabwe.
you're.
Here's also Ethan. You
Yes.
mentioned "Are You Afraid of the Dark" on that. I was
Yes.
shocked by that. Also,
I
was that still on Nickelodeon when you were a kid?
Yeah, I think
Because I thought
It
that
might
was
have
like an
been
early
reruns.
'90s show.
it was probably reruns. Like John said, a lot of this stuff
Yeah.
was. I think Goosebumps too. That was probably a lot of reruns by the
Right.
time we saw it.
Yeah.
But I think that was a more hardcore Goosebumps for me. Like that one
No,
scared me.
that
more.
was really scary. There's
That
one called Watcher's Woods that really freaked me out. It was like these woods that were alive, like this forest that was alive, and when you tried to get out of it, it would like move around to keep you from getting out of
Yeah.
it.
That's terrifying.
I think one of the early like kind of kids memorabilia things that screwed me up. I never saw the old Charlie and Chocolate Factory, but I read the book, and the book screwed me up because
Really?
because the kids were just like for me, like I feel like a lot of people have certain fears or certain things that like disgust them, and for me it's kind of like forced body modification, like stuff like that. So that really screwed me up because
Very
these kids are like
sounds like it's a big problem.
well,
like in
these
the United
kids
States.
are like permanently like stretched or like shrunk or like bloated or whatever, and like they
Yeah.
just go off and live life like that because
He put him in the
because they're
stretch machine
kids
to
and
make
there's-
him long again.
not
He
in the-
didn't leave him
I'm pretty
shrunk.
sure in the book they didn't.
They put her in the squeeze thing.
I don't
Get
know,
all the juices
man.
out.
But yeah, but they were still messed up walking away at the end, and I remember
know.
that. And then there was this book, there was this movie, from like the 1920s or 30s. I don't remember how I first found out about it, but it was like these circus freaks, and this woman, like married like this rich guy, but in doing so, she cheated on this on one of the freaks that like was into her. And then they chased her down, and there's like this like famous thing, and I rewatched it, which I hated myself for because I got like wigged out by it. But they're like chasing after her, and it's like dark, and it's at night, and it's like in a cornfield kind of thing, and they're like chasing,
Always.
and they're like gobble gobble, we will make you one of us.
Oh, that does sound terrifying.
And then like they catch her, and it like fades out, and it opens up, and she's like on next attraction, and her body's been all disfigured, and she's like a human like duck now. So like they like melted like her limbs.
She's a human duck.
They melted her limbs and then like tarred and feathered her permanently, and like they like messed up her legs and stuff. So
Wow.
like stuff like that, like
You're scarred, is what you're
wigs me-
saying.
Yeah, I am scarred.
Is there
That
a
stuff-
couch here?
Anytime there's a story or a horror movie and someone like Superman 3, you probably saw that, right?
Yeah.
Superman
Remember
3
when
terrified you?
when the woman becomes an android,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the machine, like that would freak the hell out of me because it's like because she doesn't want that, and now she just lost herself. Like she lost her identity.
Wow.
So that stuff.
That's a very interesting fear.
Yeah.
That's
It's a
a
huge
very
fear.
peculiar, unique fear.
Pretty legit.
Did you guys ever see Tales from the Crypt?
Yes, my brother loved that show, and we used to watch it together.
That was another like early
was a freaky
90s
show,
type
yeah.
thing. I used to, so when I was a little kid, probably about 6 years old, I would sneak out of bed in the middle of the night, and I would go into the living room and turn on the TV and watch Tales from the Crypt. And some of that stuff was really intense. Like there was one episode about this guy who he stole some money and he's trying to like outrun the cops in the desert or something, and then he's like on foot and he falls off this cliff, and like the end of the episode is that he breaks his neck and he's paralyzed and these vultures are like eating him. And I don't know, there's all kinds of different episodes like that. Like there was one with like these two women who are like zombies and they're rotting at the end. Like it was very extreme, like it warped a 6-year-old mind a lot, I'm thinking.
I've always wondered about that stuff. Like even the Goosebump books, it's a weird thing to write. Like,
well, you said you never read any Goosebumps books.
No, I didn't. But it's a weird thing to write.
Because of your parents?
No, I just didn't. Like I always saw. I've never really been into like horror, and not in like a really terrified kind of way. I just didn't really. I always found the stories really shallow and kind of.
Yeah.
I'm scared and then I die and then it's over.
It's a bittersweet thing.
Yeah, and then but Goosebumps is kind of a weird thing to me. Like imagine being the person who writes horror stuff for children. Like my job is like terrified children.
Right.
Like that's kind of a weird career choice.
Can you imagine if you like?
Well, I think that some of it is like morality lessons too.
Sure.
So like you're talking about Willy Wonka, and they're talking about
don't be a little brat.
Yeah, exactly. It's Charlie won out in the end because he wasn't such a jackass like all the other ones.
Right.
But they're kids though. That's what scared me about it.
Well, you and your liberal niceties need to be a little harder on kids. None of this gentle parenting nonsense. You got to be like the little chick who smacked her kid in Ferguson. It's good, man.
What?
Now, gentle parenting, you've never heard of that? It's a thing. Gentle parenting is the idea that like
being their friend.
Right. You treat your child as your friend, not as your kid. So you don't not only I mean, obviously they don't believe in physical discipline, but then they don't believe in like harsh speaking or yelling or anything like that.
Right.
Which is I think kind of nutty, but
like that's like the point of like even older fairy tales or whatever, like Hansel and Gretel or whatever. It's like it's supposed to be like a morality lesson.
It worked, right? Did it work? Can we say that it probably worked?
No, it just made me not want to read Roald Dahl. And then I just read Shel Silverstein and his.
So here's what I was wondering when I was watching I Will Wear My Cape. Did you guys ever watch pro wrestling?
Yes.
Yes. Wait.
But not really as really little kids.
No,
because when I was a little kid, that was like the Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah, no, we were way after
Jake
that.
the Snake Roberts.
The Animal.
The Animal?
What was he? The Ultimate Warrior. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Like that's when I was a little kid. And like very like cartoonish, colorful characters, but you guys were after that.
Yeah, we were after that. We were the more
we were Rey Mysterio, Cena. I mean, sometimes I watched a little bit.
But right, or like the origins of Cena, not like.
Oh yeah, I watched a little bit of the WWF. So like The Rock, Steve
so like
Austin.
That's when you were a kid, is like Steve Austin, The Rock.
Yeah.
The Attitude Era.
Yeah.
Really
that's weird because like that's for me, like that's when I came back to wrestling. So like I watched wrestling when I was a little kid. It was like Hulk Hogan and Big Boss Man and Jake the Snake Roberts, and then like I stopped watching wrestling. Then when I was like 13, I started watching again. It was because it was cool.
Yeah.
And everyone in the school had a Austin 316 shirt or whatever. Right. But it's weird that like you were a little kid during like that really edgy period. That's kind of strange.
Well, I remember we used to play SmackDown versus Raw games.
Right.
And
I was awesome at them.
He sucked at them. And
you mean I sucked?
You sucked to play.
By that you mean I was awesome.
He brought home like one of the newer ones like right after we got it and had it for like a week. Yeah. He memorized how to counter, and it would piss me off because I could never do a grab. I'd have to just punch the.
I play to win. What can I say?
My cousin would play, and his stamina would go down, and he'd run out the ring and be like, "I'm on my stamina break," and like, I'd fly out the ring and attack him. But no, I mean we kind of grew up when there was a lot of colorful characters like Rey Mysterio.
That was WCW, by the way. I don't know if you guys even know what that was. Do you know what WCW was?
I only knew
it's WWE with like, but they beat the crap out of each other with sticks all the time.
I had a poster of Goldberg.
ECW.
That's ECW.
See,
WCW's World
circa 1998, 1999, there were 3 wrestling companies. There was the WWF, there was WCW, which is owned by Ted Turner, if you guys know who that guy is, billionaire.
Yeah.
And what he did is he actually bought all of the old wrestlers. he got Hulk Hogan to come over. He got Macho Man Randy Savage to come over, Lex Luger, all these guys. He like bought them off to come over, and that's actually why Vince McMahon had to come up with all these new guys like Steve Austin, The Rock,
Right.
because he lost his whole roster. And then Paul Heyman, if you know who he is, he started a different company called ECW, and that's where they had like all the matches with all the chairs and kendo sticks and tables that were on fire and all that crazy stuff.
Yeah. I feel like after we kind of stopped watching though, they kind of lost their characters.
Yeah.
It's like I remember.
Well, what happened is the ECW and WCW both went out of business in 2001.
Yeah.
So now it's only WWE, formerly.
Well, I mean,
WWF.
it was like right after 2010, we kind of just stopped, and like now, I remember we rented some wrestling game, and like we couldn't tell the difference between half the people because they all just had like regular tights on, and like there was no like characters. Like we used to do it, and there was like a boogeyman guy. And
I remember the boogeyman.
Was
that was a short-lived gimmick.
It was.
Yeah, it was.
It was a good gimmick, but it was short-lived.
Yeah. There was like all kinds of crazy stuff like that, and we were all like really into it. But
yeah, it kind of faded out. But a lot of that faded out for me, at least, with the rise of UFC and stuff.
Yeah.
Came much more.
I've started watching UFC recently, and when people used to criticize wrestling, like, oh, it's fake.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, but it's
of course
everything that you watch on TV is fake.
Right.
Sitcoms are fake, whatever. But I understand now, like, if you watch UFC, it's like you can't watch wrestling again. It's like, what the fuck am I watching? This
it just seems like a waste of time.
When you see someone get like a fake punch and then they like
But
sit down like they got stunned.
I mean, I went to SmackDown versus Raw once at Mohegan, and it was a lot more fun.
Oh yeah, wrestling and
it was a lot more fun
to
to watch there than it was on TV.
Yeah.
Certainly way more fun.
If you go to like independent shows, those are really good too because all the old guys go there, like Sergeant Slaughter, probably before even your time.
Yeah.
Like the really old guys will go to those. So.
Yeah, I mean,
I met Roddy Piper just died.
Yeah.
And I actually got to meet him at one of those independent shows.
Really?
Oh wow, that's cool. I think I saw you posted something on Facebook.
So do you play like UFC games?
No, not really.
He sucks at them too.
It's a lie. It's a
Well,
lie.
it sucks. Like
I slaughtered you with those games.
It's not fun playing.
Yeah, but that's just because you didn't have the understanding that I had of MMA.
Well, like,
so like whenever it went on the ground, it's
my
it'd probably be different now.
Just such a
I haven't played it in
douche
forever.
about it. But like,
Okay, guys. Okay. So I think that's going to do it for this edition of Primo Nutmeg. I'd like to thank both of you for being here tonight. And for all of our listeners, I'd like to encourage them to listen to Cup of Thought. And what's the next one that's going to be up?
It's about Black Lives Matter. Two white guys talking about black.
Very familiar with it.
Awesome.
Yeah, an issue I really relate to a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Heritage.
Well, folks, please do listen to Cup of Thought. Please also listen to the Robocast.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, you guys too. Everyone listen to the Robocast. And if you did enjoy this show tonight, like Primo Nutmeg on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Thank you once again. And once again, playing us out tonight is another song by Mike Messervy.